Chapter 750. His voice was deep and mellow. With a chuckle, he sounded even more unrestrained. 36 respected Elder Ming lifted his eyelids and took a glance at him. Rongxiu was smiling. There was a hint of a smile in between his eyebrows, like the beginning of spring. However, that pair of deep eyes wasn't looking at the chessboard. They were silent with hidden ripples, as though he had sunk into deep thought. 36 respected Elder Ming was a little surprised. Rongxiu was actually a very prideful person. In terms of chess skills, he could be said to be the best of the best. 36 respected Elder Ming felt that his standard was already not bad. However, in front of Rongxiu, he couldn't even find out his bottom line. At the very least, among the people that he knew, no one could win against Rongxiu in this aspect. No, it should be said that there was no one who could compete with him. Your Highness, do you mean that there is someone who can compete with you? Yes. Rongxiu tilted his body slightly and propped up his elbows. No one knew what he thought of, but he suddenly laughed. I have lost quite a number of times. 36 respected Elder Ming was even more shocked. From what he said, he didn't lose because he went easy. He really lost. There is actually such a person in this world? It wasn't an easy thing to win against Rongxiu. Of course there is. Rongxiu's smile deepened. However, there was a tinge of extremely faint gentleness in his eyes. However, if we were to meet again now, my chances of winning would be higher. Knock knock. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Come in. Rongxiu said indifferently. Yanqing walked in and bowed to the two of them one after another before saying, Your Highness, 36 respected Elder Ming. The people from the Ming tribe are here. They want to see 36 respected Elder Ming. The Ming tribe was one of the tribes. It was also the clan that 36 respected Elder Ming came from. Because of 36 respected Elder Ming, the Ming tribe's status wasn't low. However, 36 respected Elder Ming's expression changed. He immediately became impatient. Why are they here again? Didn't I say that this old man is very busy and told them not to disturb this old man's business? Yanqing lowered her head and said respectfully, Respected Elder, after you came out of seclusion this time, they sent people over. But at that time, you were busy discussing important matters with the other revered elders, so you didn't get to meet him. Now that they've heard that you've finally returned from your travels, they've specially rushed over. These bastards definitely didn't have any good intentions. It's fine if I don't meet him. Go back and tell them that this old man is in seclusion. I don't have time to see them recently. Every time they asked to see him, nothing good ever came out of it. Who knew why they were here this time? One had to know that not long ago, Rongxiu had personally led an army to wipe out a division. Weren't they just looking for trouble by coming here at such a sensitive time? Missing. They were all gone. Yanqing hesitated for a moment and said, Respected Elder, the news of you and His Highness playing chess for a few days has already spread outside. They also know about it. Otherwise, how would those people dare to block him here? 36 respected Elder Ming was extremely frustrated. Seeing his reaction, Yanqing knew that it was best for her not to say anything else. But she had to say those words. In the end, she could only bite the bullet and say, They also said that they'll continue to wait for you here. Whenever you're done with your work, you can just meet them. 36 respected Elder Ming was so angry that he blew his beard and glared. In the end, he could only leave. From the looks of it, those people from the Ming division couldn't avoid being reprimanded again. A long time after he left, Rongxiu sat up straight. He moved his wrist and a crystal barrier appeared on the chessboard. Sunlight shone in from the window and shone on the crystal-clear crystal barrier. It was bright and moving. Then there was the second one. Then there was the third one. Rongxiu took out a total of 6 crystal barriers and placed them in a row on the chessboard. He looked at the crystal barriers in front of him and laughed softly. I didn't expect it to be so fast. I've refined so many for nothing. He refined these crystal barriers according to different levels and wanted to give them to her gradually. But when he knew that she was planning to go to the Tianling dynasty, he was worried and gave her that one directly. What he didn't expect was that she would actually. Rongxiu's thin lips curled up. Actually, this was within reason. After all, it was originally hers. It caused these glass worlds to have no place to be used. Yanqing stood at the side and quickly raised his eyes to take a look. He saw that his master had waved his sleeves and those crystal barriers were silently turned into dust. A light breeze blew and those flying dust instantly flew up. Then it dissipated. She quickly lowered her head. Master had spent a lot of effort to refine these crystal barriers. Now they were all destroyed. Could it be that Miss Lu Yu's side, keep all these? Rongxiu said lightly. Yes. Qing hurriedly went forward. Looking at the faint marks left on the chessboard, she faintly felt her heart ache. These were all top-grade crystal barriers made with the best materials and personally refined by her master. If they were released, who knew how many people would be willing to go bankrupt just to get one? What a pity, what a pity. She had followed her master for so many years, but the number of times she saw her master personally refining yuan instruments was few and far between. And most of them were for Miss Luyu. Her actions were clean and nimble. She quickly cleaned up the chessboard and retreated. When she reached the door, Qing paused for a moment and asked again. Your Highness, the people from the Ming division, don't you plan to meet them? Those people from the Ming division had always been restless. No one knew why they were here this time. Although 36 respected elder Ming was suppressing them, they were his clan after all. He was often restrained because of this. Xiao laughed lazily and said casually. They asked to meet 36 respected elder Ming. After killing the chicken to warn the monkey, the other divisions were much more well-behaved. Even if they wanted to cause trouble, they had to reconsider their own abilities. Moreover, with 36 respected elder Ming around, they couldn't cause trouble. Qing lowered his head and replied. Yes, I will take my leave. After speaking, he respectfully retreated. After closing the door, the room fell into silence again. After a while, Xiao looked in front of him. Come out. A huge white figure flashed past. Wuxia. She walked in front of Xiao and lay on the ground. Only a pair of icy blue eyes stared at Xiao. She looked very lovable, which was a rare sight. God knows how much she had been holding it in during this period of time. She missed her so much. Xiao glanced at her indifferently. You seem to think that this move will work on anyone? Xue's expression froze. The paw that was about to act coquettishly froze in mid-air. She didn't know how to continue. After being stunned for a while, she angrily retracted her paw. She angrily tilted her head to the side and let out a whimper. She wanted a warm and soft hug. Xiao's gaze turned cold. Dream on. Xue, Xiao continued. All right, I forgot to tell you. She has found little nine. Xue suddenly raised her head and opened her eyes wide. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 751. On Xiao's elegant face, there was a faint smile on his lips as if he was talking about a small matter that had nothing to do with him. However, Xue was very clear that his expression, what he said must be true. Many complicated emotions flashed through Xue's eyes, and it let out a low whimper. It first got up and seemed to want to go out, but after taking 2 steps, it came back and lay down beside Xiao's feet. Of course it was happy. After all, its relationship with Little Nine had always been very deep. But it felt a little lost in its heart. Thinking that Little Nine could be with it every day after it went back, Xue was very envious. Xiao glanced at it from the corner of his eyes. Seeing that it was tired, he said casually, also, it has already broken through to become a divine beast. Xue raised its head and laid down lazily again. So what if it was a divine beast? It was as if it wasn't. Xiao smiled and finally added the last fatal sentence. Its level is higher than yours. Oh whoa. Xue was immediately provoked and looked at Xiao in disbelief. Looking at Xiao's silent smile, Xue immediately understood that what he said was true. Xue was very hurt. It turned around and jumped out of the window. Cultivate. I can't lose. The soldiers in charge of guarding outside heard the sound and looked over in surprise. What happened to His Highness's magical beast? Xue's figure flashed and disappeared from everyone's sight. Qing, who had just walked outside, couldn't help but look up and shook her head sympathetically. It seemed that it was provoked by Master again. Mystic Forest. Chu Luiyue was wearing a pure gold sacred armor, blocking all the violent turbulence in the surroundings. Although they hadn't seen each other for a long time, this familiar feeling hadn't changed. Chu Luiyue was happy in his heart, but he still couldn't figure out the mystery of Xiao and the colored glass world. In the end, Chu Luiyue gritted his teeth. The next time they meet, I must ask him face to face. All of a sudden, the surrounding light began to ripple like water. Chu Luiyue looked down and vaguely saw that the light seemed to be coming from something. It was just that she was still unable to see clearly due to the surrounding light. But the closer he got, the heavier the pressure became. Dumpling's movements gradually slowed down. Clearly she was also being suppressed. Finally, one man and one beast landed. Chu Luiyue jumped down from Dumpling's back. With the protection of the pure gold sacred armor, this power and pressure would not pose any threat to her. Therefore her movements were more agile. Dumpling had a few more wounds on her body, but fortunately, they were all superficial wounds and had already begun to heal. The bloodline power in its body was extremely strong, so its recovery ability naturally increased as well. Chu Luiyue felt more at ease as she surveyed her surroundings. This place seemed to be just a simple cave. The walls were chiseled, and the ground beneath his feet was hard and uneven, not black mud. In the middle there was a protruding rock. The rock's shape was irregular, and only the top seemed to have been flattened by something, making it smooth and clean. There's a piece of crystal on top. That crystal was about the size of an adult man's 2 palms. It was about an inch thick and had an irregular shape. It was glowing with a rich and clear green color like jade. As the light emitted from above was surging upwards, the space at the bottom wasn't affected much. Chu Luiyue stared closely at that piece of crystal and vaguely saw a few broken runes on it. Could that be the broken seal that Qini mentioned previously? As Chu Luiyue was thinking, she saw the runes on it floating gently. The light on the crystal also swayed as gently as water ripples. Chu Luiyue took a step forward. Suddenly, she felt that the origin power in her body seemed to have become restless. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. She then realized that this crystal was actually absorbing the surrounding energy. The terrifying suction force that she felt just now was coming from above. She clenched her teeth and continued walking forward. Dumpling originally wanted to stop her, but after some thought, she didn't say anything and just followed closely behind her. At the same time, she handed something over. Chu Luiyue turned around and realized that it was the black shield that she took from xuanhuan previously. No, I shouldn't say that. Because this black shield was hers to begin with. Chu Luiyue took the black shield, and a hint of nostalgia flashed across her face. This black shield actually had a long history. Because of this, she found it together with the pure gold armor back then. At first, Chu Luiyue thought that the armor and shield were a pair, but she later realized that wasn't the case. The pure gold armor quickly recognized its owner, and that was how she learned its name. However, she tried many methods to awaken this black shield, but she still couldn't. Thus, she didn't even know its name until now. However, even if she didn't inject her force and didn't recognize its owner, the defense of this black shield was still extremely strong. Therefore, Chu Luiyue had always carried it with her and would only use it when she encountered a dangerous battle. The world only knew that the pure gold armor was a rare treasure, and the Empress relied on this armor to win every battle. But they didn't know that at least half of the credit belonged to this black shield. Actually, in Chu Luiyue's heart, she had always thought that the level of this black shield might be stronger than the pure gold armor. Because until she broke through to the 8th rank warrior, she was still unable to move this black shield. Without any assistance, the power of this thing was still not inferior to the pure gold armor. If it really recognized its owner, she wondered how powerful it would be. Xuanhuan only thought that this black shield was useful and didn't take it to heart. Previously, when the black shield was snatched away, although she was furious, it was only because her item was snatched away and not because she felt that she had lost a treasure. If she knew the true power of this black shield in the future, she would probably regret it so much that her intestines would turn green. Chu Luiyue placed the black shield in front of her and walked forward. With this layer of protection, that terrifying suction force was indeed blocked outside. Chu Luiyue gradually got closer and stopped when she was 5 steps away from the crystal. She then looked at it intently. From here, she could basically see the appearance of the crystal stone clearly. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue's eyes focused. In the middle of the crystal stone, there was a shuttle-like thing the size of a fingernail. Chu Luiyue frowned with uncertainty. It seemed to be a seed? It's actually the origin slaughtering sacred seed? A voice filled with shock sounded. Chu Luiyue turned her head. Taizu, you recognize this thing? What is the origin slaughtering sacred seed? She had never heard of it before. Taizu stared at the crystal stone with disbelief on his face. After a while he said, I do recognize it. Many years ago I saw it once, but at that time he had seen it in the hands of a great expert. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 752. Logically speaking, it was absolutely impossible for this thing to appear here. This was because the power of space here could not withstand the pressure of the Tutian baby at all. He had once seen with his own eyes that the Almighty had used a heaven-wrecking holy seed to easily destroy a dynasty. That was right. It was a dynasty. An existence like the Tianling dynasty. It was not hard to imagine how terrifying this thing was. It was the first time that Chu Luiyue had seen Taizu with such an expression on his face. In fact, one could see some clues from the name. Tutian baby. What kind of thing dared to have such a presumptuous name? Chu Luiyue had read countless books and she had even read many unique ancient books. However, she had never heard of this name before. Looking at Taizu's appearance, it must be very powerful. This thing can't be explained in a sentence or two. You only need to know that this thing is extremely powerful and also extremely dangerous. Taizu looked at Chu Luiyue with a grave expression. We can't stay here. We must leave as soon as possible. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly and looked up. How could they get out? Only then did Taizu realize that Chu Luiyue had been dragged down by this thing. It would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens if they wanted to go back. He sighed deeply and frowned. Looking at this thing now, it seemed to be very calm. It should be because it was trapped by the crystal outside. But who knew when it would come out? When that time came, even he would not be able to save Chu Luiyue. Seeing Taizu's worried look, Chu Luiyue was not particularly worried. She tried to persuade Taizu, don't worry too much. Maybe we can find a way to leave soon. Taizu sighed in his heart. This girl still did not know how terrifying the power of the Tutian baby was. If this was an ordinary situation, why would he be so worried? He did not know who had placed the seal on it. Now that the seal had broken, he was afraid that... Chu Luiyue took a few steps back and sat cross-legged on the flat ground at the edge of the cliff. She held the black shield in front of her. Taizu looked at her in confusion. Liu, what are you doing? Chu Luiyue put her hands on her knees and smiled. Thinking won't solve any problems. It's better to take advantage of this time to cultivate. This place may be dangerous, but the energy of heaven and earth is very rich. The speed of cultivation is several times faster than in the outside. Taizu was dumbfounded. This was a matter of life and death. Why was this girl still thinking about these things? In such a short period of time, if he were to cultivate desperately, how much could he improve? He really didn't know whether to say that she was fearless because she didn't know, or that she had gone crazy from cultivating. Sheng Guanjing held his forehead when he saw Chu Luiyue slowly close her eyes and really planned to start cultivating. Taizu. He really couldn't do anything to this girl. He looked back at the Tutian baby and walked over to Chu Luiyue, resigned to his fate. If something really happened, the girl would be safer with him in front of her. Chu Luiyue opened her eyes and looked at the translucent figure standing in front of her. Her eyes welled up with tears, and a warm current seemed to surge in her heart. Taizu, thank you. She said word by word seriously. Taizu turned around and looked at her with a deep gaze. Chu Luiyue was confused by this gaze. She unconsciously stopped her back and asked tentatively, what do you mean? Taizu? Taizu smiled bitterly, shook his head and sighed, but his expression was extremely gentle. Isn't it natural for me to protect my juniors? Chu Luiyue was stunned on the spot. Her mind went blank. Taizu knew? When did he know? She had never said. Seeing Chu Luiyue's expression, the last trace of doubt in Taizu's heart was completely eliminated. As expected, Chu Luiyue was really his bloodline. There seemed to be waves surging in the depths of his eyes as countless complicated emotions surged within. He had so many questions to ask her, but when they reached the tip of his tongue, he couldn't say anything. After a while, Chu Luiyue finally reacted and said hesitantly, Taizu, what do you mean by that, Ling Xiaopom? Seeing that Chu Luiyue still refused to admit it, Taizu smiled and shook his head. Ling Xiaopom can't be practiced by anyone who isn't a member of the Tianling dynasty's royal family. You, on the other hand, performed the third level, didn't you? Chu Luiyue suddenly understood. So that was it. At that time, she had only thought that xuanhuan hadn't seen the third level of Ling Xiaopom, so she had simply made a move. However, she had forgotten that this palm technique was created by Taizu. Even if she had only sketched an outline and hadn't really performed it, Taizu's eyesight was extraordinary. From then on, the great ancestor should have guessed something, right? Being suddenly exposed like this, Chu Luiyue felt a little embarrassed for a moment. Thinking of the various disguises she had used to deceive Taizu, she didn't know how to face it. Taizu just looked at her quietly, his eyes kind. After a while, Chu Luiyue stood up. She looked deeply at Taizu, the corners of her eyes slightly red. Then she lifted the hem of her clothes, knelt down and bowed her head to kowtow. Unfilial descendant Shangguan Yu greets Taizu. Chu Luiyue was trapped, and the crowd outside was about to go crazy from anxiety. Lei Laosi, Mu Hongyu and the rest searched seriously, and they had to confirm every face over and over again, afraid that they would miss something. However, even after they had checked all the people who were chased out, they still didn't find any traces of Chu Luiyue. Lei Laosi was almost in despair as he stared at the rapidly withering mother tree in a daze. Could it be that Her Highness really, Laosi, come back. Qin Yi suddenly spoke. Lei Laosi turned around in a daze. Qin Yi shook his head silently. Since we've already searched one round and can't find Her Highness, then she must be trapped down there. Big brother, Lei Laosi wasn't willing to move. We didn't protect Her Highness well in the past, and I didn't expect it to be the same this time. I only hate that I can't take Her Highness's place to suffer. If I could use my life to exchange for Her Highness's life, I definitely wouldn't have any objections. Qin Yi knew that once he became stubborn, even 9 bulls couldn't pull him back. Thus, he decided not to persuade him and just looked at Xuanhuan at the side. Are you sure? Xuanhuan nodded. I can confirm that she's still alive. It's just that I can't find her location in such a short period of time. There seems to be an extremely strong force under this mystic forest that isolates everything. Qin Yi felt more at ease. My instincts also feel that Her Highness is fine, but if this drags on, it'll be hard to say. We must save her, but these people here are really troublesome. He looked at Xuanhuan. At this moment, Xuanhuan was standing rooted to the ground in a daze, and her eyes were filled with shock. What happened just now? The pure gold armor actually turned into powder and completely disappeared? It was clearly fine just now. How did this happen? Quite a few people around saw this scene, and at this moment, they all quietened down and had different expressions. Amidst the embarrassing silence, a questioning voice that seemed to be suppressing something was clearly heard. Did the third princess break Her Highness' pure gold sacred armor? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 753. This sentence was very cold and harsh, like a sharp thorn that directly pierced through the dead silence. Xuanhuan looked in the direction of the voice and frowned. The person who spoke was a black cavalry soldier wearing armor. His face and body were covered in blood, and he was currently staring at her. His gaze was as cold as a knife, dense with anger that was about to burst out. Xuanhuan's expression instantly turned cold. Who do you think you are? How dare you question this princess like this? Who gave a mere black cavalry soldier the courage to speak to her with such a tone and expression? Even an important official in the imperial court wouldn't dare to not give her face like this. That soldier straightened his neck and continued speaking. This lowly one is a black cavalry lieutenant, xuanhuan. This lowly one isn't questioning Your Highness, it's just a question. The pure gold armor was the crown princess's personal armor when she was alive, and it hasn't been broken after hundreds of battles. Now that it's being used by the third princess, it hasn't been through any battles, yet it's been directly destroyed. Third princess, don't you intend to explain? Xuanhuan was so angry that she laughed. The crown princess? Xuanhuan, you couldn't be more dead, and now the entire Tianling dynasty was under her, Xuanhuan's control. She even killed Xuanhuan, so what if she used her armor? Not to mention a mere black cavalry lieutenant, even in the entire Tianling dynasty, no one had the right to question her like this. It's just a piece of armor, why should this princess give you an explanation? She looked deeply at Xuanhuan, then spoke lightly to Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, this is the soldier you're leading? Isn't this too unruly? She didn't even need to personally deal with this kind of reckless person. With just a word, Mu Qinghe would have to deal with him. However, the expected scene didn't happen. Mu Qinghe's face was expressionless, but her chin was somewhat tense, as if covered with a layer of frost. This is indeed an item that Empress Concubine treasured greatly when she was alive. The third princess might not know this, but to the soldiers of the Black Cavalry, this pure gold sacred armor had an extraordinary meaning. Now that it has been destroyed, the last general knows that you didn't do it on purpose, but please give everyone an explanation. Xuanhuan was shocked. Mu Qinghe, what is the meaning of this? Did he want her to explain or apologize? Just for a pure gold armor? Mu Qinghe met her gaze, her eyes firm and persistent. It was obvious that he wasn't going to let the matter rest. Xuanhuan trembled with anger. The pure gold sacred armor suddenly shattered. She also didn't know what was going on. She didn't even have time to feel sorry for herself, yet she had to explain herself to these people? What a joke. She looked at Jiang Yuqing angrily. Mu Qinghe was his woman. However, Jiang Yuqing seemed to be in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking. Xuanhuan called him twice before he came back to his senses. However, there was still a hint of disappointment and worry in his eyes. Xuanhuan rarely saw him like this and she felt uneasy. But the most important thing now was still the pure gold sacred armor. After Jiang Yuqing reacted, he frowned and looked at Xuanhuan. What kind of powerful treasure was the pure gold sacred armor? It had always been fine. Why did it suddenly shatter when Xuanhuan wore it? Xuanhuan was infuriated by his glare. However, considering that there were still many people watching, she could only swallow her anger. Jiang Yuqing also cared about each other's face and didn't say anything in front of Mu Qinghe. The third princess has just experienced a life-and-death situation and is still in shock. Although the pure gold sacred armor is important, it's not as important as her. You are the Black Cavalry. You know best what your first priority is. Don't forget your identity. These words were very serious. If it was in the past, Mu Qinghe would definitely not continue to say anything. But it was different this time. Mu Qinghe's expression didn't change as she said calmly, "Eldest young master, it's precisely because we are all Black Cavalry that we are very insistent on this matter. Even if I don't ask, they will ask until they get a reasonable explanation." Jiang Yuqing frowned and looked at the Black Cavalry around him. Sure enough, those soldiers had already gathered around and were looking over here. Moreover, their expressions were stubborn, exactly the same as Xuanhuan, who asked first. It was as if they wouldn't leave if Xuanhuan didn't explain. The atmosphere was heavy. There was dead silence. At this point, Xuanhuan finally realized that something was amiss, and a hint of panic flashed across her eyes. "What are you planning to do? Are you trying to rebel?" Mu Qinghe said, "The third princess is too serious." "Third princess, you're being too serious. They just want an explanation from you." "Explanation? What explanation do they need?" Ever since Xuanhuan took over power, she had never been so aggrieved. Previously, these people had clearly obeyed her every word. But just because she had destroyed a pure gold armor, they actually turned their backs on her. Extremely arrogant and presumptuous. When Qin Yi saw this scene from afar, a cold smile appeared on his lips. How would Xuanhuan, who had grown up in Xiling City with a silver spoon in her mouth, understand that military power had always been independent of imperial power? Back then, how many Black Cavalry did Her Highness risk her life to save? On the surface, this military power seemed to belong to Mu Qinghe. But in reality, it belonged to Her Highness. Chapter 754. These words came out of Mu Qinghe's mouth. Xuanhuan looked at him in shock. Did Mu Qinghe know who he was talking to? But immediately, she felt that the atmosphere around her seemed to have changed. She looked around and saw that the Black Cavalry were all looking at her, their eyes full of suppressed anger. These were all soldiers who had experienced life and death on the battlefield, and they all carried a strong murderous aura. It was fine when they were restrained, but once they exploded, it was shockingly terrifying. Even someone as tough as Xuanhuan felt a trace of fear in her heart. She even had a faint premonition that if she really angered these people, she might not even be able to walk out of the mystic forest. The way these people looked at her didn't seem like they were looking at the high and mighty third princess, but more like they were looking at an ignorant person who didn't know what was good for her. Elder Qiushi sensed that something was wrong and immediately stepped forward and said angrily, "Vice Admiral Mu, are you threatening the third princess?" Mu Qinghe looked at him coldly, his eyes full of undisguised murderous intent. Elder Qiushi's heart thumped, and a trace of fear suddenly appeared. His old face trembled and he unconsciously took half a step back. Mu Qinghe was a high-ranking general of the Tianling dynasty, and he was also the famous god of slaughter. His style of doing things was straightforward and his methods were fierce. Over the years, countless people had died at his hands. He had been very low-key for more than a year, so much so that Elder Qiushi almost forgot what a terrifying person he was. Until now, when he met Mu Qinghe's cold and stern eyes, he suddenly remembered that he couldn't afford to offend this person. In addition to his own strength, he also led tens of thousands of loyal Black Cavalry. He was just an elder of the imperial family. Although his title sounded good, how could he be a match for Mu Qinghe? Thinking of this, Elder Qiushi was terrified. Xuanhuan was angry, and her body trembled slightly as she looked at Elder Qiushi. Useless thing. Jiang Yuqing originally wanted to speak up for Xuanhuan, but in the current situation, if she didn't lower her head, it wouldn't be easy. His voice grew more serious. Xuanhuan bit her lips as her emotions churned. Finally, she gritted her teeth and said, "That pure gold armor was fine before, but it suddenly shattered. I don't know what happened either. Many people were there just now. There should be many people who can prove that I didn't do anything. The pure gold armor suddenly shattered by itself." Jiang Yuqing nodded. "That's right. That's what I saw." Soon after, a few more people gave the same response. However, many of the Black Cavalry soldiers were not satisfied with this explanation. What kind of explanation was this? Whispers of discussion could be heard from the crowd. Her Highness the Empress concubine has worn the pure gold sacred armor so many times without any problems. The third princess only wore it once and it was directly damaged? That's right. Although Her Highness the Empress concubine is no longer around, this is her relic after all. The third princess used it just like that. Really? It's fine if she used it properly, but now that the pure gold sacred armor is completely damaged and doesn't leave any traces, the third princess doesn't feel guilty at all. Instead, she's so self-righteous? Although everyone had lowered their voices, the people nearby could hear them. This was especially so for Xuanhuan, who heard it clearly. Wasn't this equivalent to criticizing her in front of her? These black cavalry soldiers were too much. Xuanhuan took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in her heart with great difficulty. She could already tell that these black cavalry soldiers respected Xuanhuan very much. She couldn't do anything to them in a short period of time. The pure gold sacred armor was already gone. She couldn't lose more because of this. If she really angered these people, who knew what they would do? Her tone finally softened. I naturally know that the pure gold sacred armor is an extremely precious item to my elder sister. It's also because of this that I took it out again. If my elder sister's spirit is in heaven, she definitely wouldn't want to see the pure gold sacred armor placed on a shelf, right? This consort personally believes that an item like this should only be used to its fullest potential. I just didn't expect such a thing to happen this time. Just now, I also went through a few life and death situations, so I was a little emotional for a moment. What I said just now wasn't intentional. This consort already feels extremely remorseful for breaking eldest sister's things. Xuanhuan's voice even sounded a little choked as she spoke. Not to mention other things, her acting skills were still very good. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to reach her current position. Xuanhuan turned his face away with a hint of disdain in his eyes. Only a brainless person would believe Xuanhuan's explanation. If she hadn't been forced to this extent, she would probably still be as arrogant as before. Like Xuanhuan, most of the black cavalry soldiers disdained Xuanhuan's words. Jianghu came out to smooth things over. Alright, let's end this matter here for now. Right now, it's more important to leave this mystic forest first. Half of the leaves on that mother tree had already withered and fallen. It wouldn't be long before it completely withered. When those xuanhuan withered, the entire mystic forest was almost turned upside down. Who knew what the consequences would be if something happened to this mother tree? Mu Qinghe also glanced at the mother tree and nodded gently. Soldiers of the Black Cavalry, listen up. Gather. Yes. Mu Qinghe gave the order and immediately received everyone's response. All the soldiers ran one after another and lined up neatly in a short while. There were also people who were seriously injured who were taken care of by the side. On the battlefield, they had encountered situations that were several times more tragic than this. It was naturally not a problem to deal with such a situation. Mu Qinghe glanced around. All captains report the number of survivors. Xuanhuan straightened his back. Reporting, first squad of the Black Cavalry, 63 survivors. When they arrived, there were a total of 10 squads. Each squad had 100 soldiers and was led by a captain. Out of 100 people, 63 survived. The casualties could be said to be heavy. The other captains also reported the situation of their squads. Among them, 4 captains of the squads died. With every sentence, Mu Qinghe's face turned colder. Although he had roughly guessed this number before, when he heard the confirmation, his heart still wavered. With every sentence, the surrounding atmosphere became more and more solemn. By the time the last person finished speaking, the entire forest had fallen silent. Before they came, the Black Cavalry had 1,000 people. Now, only 617 of them were left. Nearly 400 of them were rescued by Chu Luiyue and the others. Without them, the consequences would be even more unimaginable. They had only entered the mystic forest once and almost half of them had died. The situation of the other sects was not much better. Basically, 1/3 of them had died. At this moment, Xuanhuan said, "We can't stay here anymore. Let's go to the Mirror Lake." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. A voice filled with shock and surprise was heard. They turned around. Senior brother Zhu Hong? Mu Hongyu quickly glanced at Zhu Hong. His injuries were basically fine, and there were still a few people standing behind him. They were all Dragon Teeth Mountain disciples. "You didn't follow them?" asked Mu Hongyu strangely. Zhu Hong shook his head. "Liu saved our lives. How can we just leave like that?" He previously thought that Chu Luiyue was already dead, so he felt terrible for a long time. Seeing that Mu Hongyu and the rest were still standing there, he was curious and came over. In the end, he happened to hear them discussing how to find Chu Luiyue. Not mentioning other things, Qin Yi and Lei Laosi were very strong. If they believed that Chu Luiyue was still alive, then it shouldn't be wrong. He originally didn't want to believe that Chu Luiyue was dead. Now that he heard that there was still hope, he naturally wanted to search for her. Then Zhu Hong looked at Qin Yi and bowed solemnly. He could tell that Qin Yi was the strongest among them and was also the backbone of the group. The most important thing was that Qin Yi was willing to help find Chu Luiyue. Young Master Qin, we know that we're weak and injured, so we can't help much. However, Luyu did us a huge favor and we'll definitely repay him. If you have any requests, just let us know. As long as we can help even a little, we'll be happy. Qin Yi glanced at him and his gaze became gentler, but he still shook his head. I understand your intentions, but this place is really dangerous. But this place is indeed dangerous. You can't stay here. The faces of Zhu Hong and the others were filled with disappointment. The hidden force below is extremely scary. Once it explodes, even fourth brother and I might not be able to protect you. If something really happens, wouldn't it be a waste of her efforts to save you? Qin Yi's tone was very calm, but every word he said was like a stone that heavily smashed into everyone's hearts. Zhu Hong laughed bitterly. He understood that Qin Yi's words were very tactful. All of them were more or less injured. I'm not afraid of not being able to help. I'm just afraid that I'll become a burden instead. After thinking for a while, Zhu Hong sighed. Young Master Qin is right. I'll leave the matter of finding Luyu to you. Qin Yi nodded lightly. These few people from Dragon Teeth Mountain have good characters and are more sensible. Can be seen that Jianxia taught them well. On the other hand, Song Qingyan hurriedly left with xuanhuan and the rest when he heard that this place was dangerous. Zhu Hong looked at Mu Hongyu. Originally, he wanted to persuade Mu Hongyu to leave with them, but he thought that she was close friends with Chu Luiyue and definitely wouldn't be willing to leave. Thus he didn't say that. Hongyu, you guys be careful. Mu Hongyu isn't injured and has a faint yuan body. She might really be able to help Qin Yi and the rest. Mu Hongyu nodded. Senior brothers and senior sisters, be careful. Very quickly, Zhu Hong and the rest also left with the group. Only Qin Yi and the rest were left on the spot. The mother tree was still rapidly withering. After walking for some distance, xuanhuan looked back and vaguely saw that there were still a few people standing there without moving. She narrowed her eyes. Qin Yi and Lei Laosi aren't our people, so it's normal for them not to leave with us. However, why are the others still waiting there? Jiang Yuqing followed her line of sight and looked back, frowning slightly. What are they doing there? Xuanhuan sneered in her heart. Are they still waiting for Chu Luiyue to come back from the dead? Digression, I'm about to turn into a raisin, make up at 6 p.m. Also, mobile users with today's update, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Web. Chapter 756. They probably don't want to believe the truth and want to continue searching for Chu Luiyue's traces. Xuanhuan said nonchalantly, but her eyes were filled with disdain and mockery. Jiang Yuqing saw her expression, and a tinge of impatience and disgust rose in his heart. His expression also became much colder as he looked at Mu Qinghe. They came together after all. How can we leave them behind alone? Go and call them back. Mu Qinghe's brows moved slightly, and a tinge of surprise flashed across her eyes. Jiang Yuqing doesn't seem to have a good relationship with Chongshu Pavilion. Why is he concerned about the lives of our disciples at this time? This really doesn't match his usual style of doing things. As she was too shocked, Mu Qinghe paused for a moment before nodding. The last general will? Why do you care about them? Xuanhuan suddenly spoke and interrupted Mu Qinghe. As if realizing that her words were a little inappropriate, her expression changed slightly as she coughed and added a few more sentences. Oh, what I mean is that their hearts and minds are filled with finding Chu Luiyue. It's useless for anyone to persuade them. They might even end up being blamed in the end. Even though they came together, this is what they want to do. Outsiders have no right to interfere, right? She looked at Jiang Yuqing meaningfully and seemingly smiled. Yuqing, I know you have good intentions, but sometimes good intentions often lead to bad things. Anyway, with Qin Yi and Lei Laosi around, nothing will happen to them. They might even want to follow Qin Yi and Lei Laosi. But in this Dahuang swamp, it's really dangerous for a few people to be alone. Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows. Why don't we send a portion of the Black Cavalry and go together with them? Together with what? Xuanhuan cut him off as if she was joking. Yuqing, don't tell me you want to find Chu Luiyue too? We know you. We know you're doing this for their own good. But in the eyes of those who don't know what's going on, that might not necessarily be the case. You don't want to be misunderstood, do you? The fire in Jiang Yuqing's chest arched, and he finally suppressed it with great difficulty. I got it. What you said makes sense. Just let them be. Only then did Xuanhuan stop and lower her eyes. However, the bottom of her heart was not so calm. She had deliberately mentioned Chu Luiyue just now to test him. She could clearly see the panic in Jiang Yuqing's eyes for a moment. Why was he panicking? Xuanhuan walked forward step by step, but her body was tense and her hands were tightly clenched. Her face was covered with a veil, and there were scars on her face, so it was not easy for others to see her expression. However, the aura around her was extremely cold. She had long suspected that Jiang Yuqing had feelings for Chu Luiyue, and now it seemed that it was true. If it were someone else, he would definitely not say a word. Was it just because of the somewhat similar eyebrows? Xuanhuan was unconvinced and unwilling to accept it. Although the two of them had killed Xuanhuan together, she knew that many years ago Jiang Yuqing did indeed like Xuanhuan. However, for some reason, it seemed that his attitude toward Xuanhuan changed overnight. Until now she still did not know why. She had never asked. Jiang Yuqing also liked her, but this kind of like was different from the kind of like he used to like Xuanhuan. She knew that once she asked, many things would be different. She was not that stupid. Besides, Xuanhuan was dead after all. What was the point of arguing with a dead person? However, this time Jiang Yuqing felt that familiar uneasiness toward Chu Luiyue. Xuanhuan glanced at Jiang Yuqing. He fell into deep thought again. No one knew what he was thinking. Along the way he had lost count of how many times he had been like this. The people who could make him feel this way were Xuanhuan and Chu Luiyue. Xuanhuan wanted to flare up, but she suppressed it. In the end, both of them were dead. Just like that, Xuanhuan secretly comforted herself for a long time before she finally calmed down. However, Jiang Yuqing, who was next to her, did not notice it at all. Or perhaps he noticed it but he was too lazy to care. The two of them walked forward together, but they had different thoughts and did not speak. A few hours later they finally walked out of the mystic forest and arrived at the border of Mirror Lake. Mirror Lake is up ahead. Mu Qinghe said in a low voice. Xuanhuan perked up and looked forward. At this time the sun was setting in the west. At the border where the water met the sky, large patches of clouds floated. Light pierced through the clouds and dyed half the sky a brilliant gold. Below, Mirror Lake was boundless, reflecting the scenery in the sky. At first glance it looked like a huge mirror on the ground. Everyone quieted down. Such a scene could be considered as a paradise on earth. I didn't expect the scenery of Mirror Lake to be so beautiful. Yeah, just one look and I'm mesmerized. This is the most beautiful place I've seen in my life. It looks calm and peaceful. It doesn't seem as scary as the rumors say. Many disciples walked forward and looked at the scenery with intoxicated expressions. They praised it one after another. Compared to the purgatory-like mystic forest, this place was many times better. However, while they were immersed in the moving scenery of Mirror Lake, many of the Black Cavalry members looked tense. He seemed to be very nervous. Even Mu Qinghe was no exception. Your Highness, First Young Master, Mirror Lake looks peaceful, but it's actually as dangerous as the mystic forest. It's better to be careful. He originally wanted to say that Mirror Lake was more dangerous than the mystic forest, but after considering what happened in the mystic forest, he decided to put the two on the same level. Of the three places in Dahuang Swamp, this is the place with the highest number of deaths. Mu Qinghe's words made everyone quiet down. Many of the sect disciples who had previously yearned for the Mirror Lake were stunned when they heard this. They looked at each other in dismay. Xuanhuan was also surprised. Really? But Mirror Lake doesn't look like anything. Wait, what's that? Everyone followed her line of sight. In the middle of Mirror Lake, there was a flower breaking out of the water and rising slowly. It was a palm-sized flower with a total of 5 petals that were pink and white in color. Under the afterglow of the setting sun, it looked translucent. It looked magnificent and beautiful. When the breeze blew, it swayed gently. Elder Qiushi suddenly widened his eyes in shock. Isn't that the dancing lotus? Xuanhuan was pleasantly surprised. Elder Qiushi, are you sure that's the dancing lotus? It was rumored to be a top-grade medicinal herb that could revive the dead and regrow flesh and bones. The dancing lotus. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 757. I've only seen it in ancient books, but looking at its appearance it should be close to the mark. Elder Qiushi was also very excited and his face flushed. Even in the entire Tianling dynasty, there might not be such a rare treasure. Rumor has it that the dancing lotus takes 100 years to germinate, 100 years to grow branches, and 300 years to bloom. However, its flowering period was only a short 5 years. If no one plucked it within 5 years, the dancing lotus flower would fall and bear fruit again, entering another 500-year cycle. Currently, this dancing lotus flower was in its flowering period. Elder Qiuxi's eyes lit up. Your Highness, we've really come to the right place this time. As long as we have this dancing lotus, His Majesty's health will definitely improve. Although the few herbs that they planned to find previously were also considered treasures, compared to this dancing lotus, they were many levels apart. Xuanhuan was also very happy. This time, she came to Dahuang Swamp in the name of finding herbs for her father. The only mythical beast had already died with Chu Luiyue. It would probably be difficult to meet another one. However, as long as they had this dancing lotus, they didn't need to find any other herbs. It would definitely be perfect to bring it back. It must be the third princess's filial piety that allowed us to encounter this dancing lotus. Elder Qiuxi sighed and didn't forget to flatter her. As expected, Xuanhuan's mood became better after hearing that. What? It's clearly because father is the emperor and is blessed with good fortune. I can only see this dancing lotus because of fate. With this dancing lotus, she only needed to take a small portion, and she might be able to heal all the injuries on her face and body. Thinking of this, Xuanhuan yearned for it even more, and she was about to move forward. However, just as she took half a step, she recalled what Mu Qing had said just now. This mirror lake doesn't seem to be an ordinary dangerous place? She looked at Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, you know this mirror lake the best. I wonder if you have a way to get that dancing lotus? After Xuanhuan and the rest left with the large group, Mu Hongyu and the rest were left behind. After confirming that there was no one else around, Lei Laosi finally spoke. Big brother, do you have a way to find her? His expression was nervous and worried, and there was a trace of fear in the depths of his eyes. He was really worried that something would happen to His Highness. Even with the crimson gold red phoenix, she was only a rank 5 warrior. If she encountered great danger, after all, even he was shocked by the power that was faintly spreading from the mother tree. Qin Yi furrowed his brows slightly as he looked at the mother tree and narrowed his eyes. She should be down here, but none of us should be able to enter at the moment. As soon as he finished speaking, a look of despair appeared on their faces. Even young Master Qin can't do it? Yi Ranran asked softly with reddened eyes. Qin Yi was the strongest among them. If he said that he couldn't do it, then Qin Yi sighed and looked at Chan Wanzhou. Do you know how she is now? Chan Wanzhou pressed his lips tightly together and shook his head. He was more sensitive than the average person. In addition, the Cloud Sky Copper Sword was personally made by him, so he could usually determine her position more quickly and accurately and know if she was dead or alive. However, he couldn't do more than that. Also, as Qin Yi said, there was indeed a force below that blocked everything outside, so they couldn't detect any movement at all. At this point, there was basically only a quarter of the leaves on the mother tree left. Qin Yi glanced at it and suddenly waved his sleeves to set up a barrier. The green barrier instantly enveloped Mu Hongyu and the rest. Compared to the previous barrier he set up, the aura this time was clearly much stronger. Mu Hongyu and the rest looked at each other in shock. Qin Yi's cultivation level seemed to be much stronger than what we imagined. He actually hid his true abilities previously. Laosi, stay here and look after them. I'll be back soon. Lei Laosi immediately said, Big brother, I'll go with you. Qin Yi shook his head. Nobody knew what would happen next, so it was better to be careful. These few people were all friends that Her Highness valued, so he naturally had to protect them well. Lei Laosi could only stay on the spot. Qin Yi walked forward. The withered leaves fell down and landed on his head and body. He raised his hand, picked up a leaf and took a closer look. The originally emerald green leaf rapidly turned yellow and curled up within a few seconds. The energy and vitality contained in it seemed to have been sucked away by something. He knitted his brows and looked forward. A branch suddenly broke and fell from above. Without a doubt, that branch had also completely withered. Qin Yi glanced at it and was about to continue walking forward when he suddenly realized that a dark green glow seemed to have flashed across the spot where the branch broke. He took 2 steps closer and lowered his head to take a look. As expected, there was a faint dark green glow at the spot where the branch broke. His heart skipped a beat, and he waved his hand to cut off a branch. The branch fell at the same spot and in the same scene. Gotcha. At this moment, a cracking sound was heard from the front. Qin Yi immediately looked up and saw that there was actually a crack on the extremely thick tree trunk. That crack was only the thickness of a finger and an inch long. Compared to the entire tree, it wasn't worth mentioning at all. However, very quickly a dark green glow shone out from within. Deep underground in the cave, the glow shone in all directions. The entire space was silent. That's roughly what happened. Chu Liyue calmly explained her situation to Taizu briefly before kneeling down and kowtowing again. I hid a lot of things from Taizu previously, so please forgive me, Taizu. Taizu looked at her deeply, reached out, and gently caressed her hair as he sighed. Child, it's been hard on you. Digression. It's already a lousy February. It should be at 9 p.m. and will continue to be updated. Those who can't wait until tomorrow can also watch it. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 758. When Chu Liyue talked about the past previously, she had always been very calm. Although those people and those things were like the sharpest blade, leaving the deepest and most painful scars on her. But now she could face it calmly. His tone was calm and his expression was indifferent, as if he was talking about someone else. However, when Taizu said that sentence, Chu Liyue's nose twitched, and her eyes turned red. Those painful memories could no longer affect her in the slightest. She thought her heart was as hard as a rock. She didn't expect to be so easily defeated by Taizu's words. Although Taizu didn't have a physical body, Chu Liyue couldn't feel his caress. However, she seemed to have been comforted by something in an instant. A hole opened up in the dam that had been built high in her heart, allowing the countless suppressed emotions to surge out like a flood. Chu Liyue closed her eyes and a hot tear fell silently. After a while, she raised her head and smiled at Taizu. Taizu's words were enough for Luyu. Taizu looked at the girl in front of him, his eyes full of pity. When he saw Chu Liyue perform the third level of the Lingxiao palm, countless conjectures flashed through his mind. But he still didn't expect her experience to be so rough and strange. He sighed and shook his head, and a trace of anger flashed across his face. I didn't expect that there would be such a despicable person in the Xuanhuan family. Xuanhuan really doesn't deserve this name. He didn't take Xuanhuan seriously before. He just felt that this junior was not generous enough and seemed to be quite scheming, so he didn't like her very much. But he didn't expect that she would do such a thing as killing her own clan and deceiving her superiors and subordinates. In order to get everything she wanted, she was really crazy. If the Tianling dynasty is really handed over to her, I'm afraid the consequences will be unimaginable. Perhaps the 1,000-year foundation of the Tianling dynasty will be destroyed in Xuanhuan's hands. Chu Liyue said word by word, Taizu, don't worry. Don't worry, ancestor. With Liyue around, I definitely won't let her have her way. She will eventually pay the price for everything she has done. Taizu looked at Chu Liyue with a relieved expression. Fortunately, in the Xuanhuan family besides her, there's still a good child like you, Luyu. Suddenly thinking of something, the great ancestor suddenly laughed and said, No wonder I felt very close to you when I saw you. We are family. Back then, after he left the Tianling God realm with Chu Liyue, he was very curious about everything about the Tianling royal family. When Chu Liyue went to the palace to see Xuanhuan, he had secretly tried to look at Xuanhuan. In the end, he was greatly disappointed. In comparison, he still liked Chu Liyue more, so he had always been by her side. He gradually lost interest in the Tianling royal family. After going one round, it turned out that Chu Liyue was a member of the Xuanhuan family. Chu Liyue blinked. Taizu, it's good that you don't blame me. You don't know, but when you agreed to give me the Long Yuan sword, I almost wanted to confess to you. But the situation was urgent and I didn't want to implicate you, so I didn't say it in the end. Please don't take offense. Taizu snorted. You are Xuanhuan Jing's junior. What can't you say? If I had known that Xuanhuan and Jiang Yuqing had bullied you to this extent, I definitely wouldn't have let them off. His brows furrowed slightly. I don't even have enough time to feel sorry for you. How can I bear to blame you? Chu Liyue's heart warmed. The feeling of someone standing on the same side as her, unconditionally believing and supporting her and willing to stand up for her, it was too beautiful and precious. The former Xuanhuan Yu had lost everything and only her father was left. Furthermore, he had been poisoned and fell into a coma. Until today, it was difficult for her to even see him once. And now, Chu Liyue had elders who doted on her and trusted friends. There was also Rong Xiu, who would always place her at the top of his heart. Back then, I was willing to give you the Long Yuan sword for 2 reasons. Taizu's expression became much more serious. Chu Liyue subconsciously straightened her back. Firstly, the Long Yuan sword awakened and chose you as its new master. Although it's a Yuan instrument that I refined, it has its own intelligence. You should know that many people from the Tianling dynasty have entered the Tianling god realm over the years to ask for the Long Yuan sword, but they all failed in the end. And when you appeared, the Long Yuan sword reacted very quickly and woke up. It's not just me. It has also waited for 1,000 years for a new master that it likes. Now that it finally chose you, I naturally won't object. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and finally asked the question in her heart. Even so, you spent a lot of effort to refine the Long Yuan sword. You should have wanted to leave it for the Tianling royal family. But at that time you didn't know my identity. Why did you still give it to me so straightforwardly? Chu Luiyue believed that if Taizu wanted to stop her, he would definitely be able to. But he didn't. Instead, he gave the Long Yuan sword to her very generously. Chu Luiyue couldn't figure this out no matter how hard she tried. If it was any other treasure, it would be fine if he gave it to an outsider. But this Long Yuan sword was a symbol of Taizu's identity and also an existence that was like a sacred item of the Tianling dynasty. Its significance was extraordinary. Taizu giving it to her so straightforwardly was really out of her expectations. This is the second point that I want to talk about. Taizu paused for a moment and looked at Chu Luiyue with a complicated gaze. You probably don't know yet, but inside the black pyramid in your body, there seems to be a bloodline power of the Tianling royal family. Digression. A wasted February was dragged to work by mobile users. Please browse and read at around 9:30 p.m. A better reading experience comes from iJing. Chapter 759. Once he said that, Chu Luiyue was dazed. She looked at Taizu in a daze. What do you mean by that? Taizu looked into Chu Luiyue's eyes and said firmly. It means that there's the aura of a member of the Tianling royal family hidden inside. According to my guess, it's very likely to be a soul. Chu Luiyue's pupils constricted, and she almost blurted out. How is that possible? It's really very likely. Taizu put his hands behind his back with a solemn expression. If it's just a pure force, what's the point of locking it up like this? Do you still remember the scene when you flew down the crater and entered the space under the Long Yuan sword? Countless images flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind. Of course she remembered. Everything that happened that day was still vivid in her mind. Do you know that I specially set up that space? Those who aren't from the Tianling royal family aren't allowed to enter. Taizu's words were like a heavy hammer that smashed Chu Luiyue's head hard. Her eyes suddenly lit up. That's right. When she jumped down the crater, sword aura was everywhere. At the crucial moment, the black pyramid flew out and opened the door, allowing her to enter. Later, a crack appeared on the seal of the black pyramid. At that time, I sensed that the aura inside was extremely familiar. At that time, I thought that the soul of a descendant of the Tianling royal family was sealed inside, so I agreed to give you the Long Yuan sword and leave the Tianling god realm with you. Taizu originally wanted to take the opportunity to attack the black pyramid again to see what secrets were hidden inside. In the end, that crack actually repaired itself. The aura inside was isolated again. With his current cultivation level and strength, it was really difficult to break that seal. Therefore he put this matter aside for now. It wasn't until today that he confirmed Chu Luiyue's identity that he finally told her everything. Chu Luiyue listened bit by bit, and it was as if stormy waves had surged in her heart. She had guessed countless times what was hidden in the Black Pyramid, but she had never thought of this possibility. Are you sure that it's really? Chu Luiyue's throat tightened. Taizu nodded. Absolutely. Chu Luiyue closed his eyes. Since the Taizu were so certain, then this matter was most likely true. However, this was simply too inconceivable. To tell you the truth, I accidentally obtained this item in country Yao Chen's imperial mausoleum. Originally, there was no seal on it, but I met a mysterious person who forcefully sealed it and gave it to me. As Chu Luiyue spoke, he stretched out his right hand. The Black Pyramid appeared in her palm. Its surface was dull and pitch black, and it looked very ordinary. The crack that had appeared earlier had indeed been repaired. Chu Luiyue frowned. If there really was a person's soul inside, then who could it be? She sat there quietly like a statue, as motionless as a mountain, and quickly absorbed the energy. And the speed was getting faster and faster. The great ancestor was horrified. Chu Luiyue, she was actually snatching the energy from the Tutian baby? He originally thought that she was at most recuperating for a while. He did not expect that she was actually planning to cultivate, and the key point was that she did it. The Tutian baby looked like a small bead, but in fact, it was very domineering. The entire mystic forest was under its control. Everything that had happened before was actually its doing. It could quickly devour all the energy in the surrounding space. In the end, it caused the space to completely collapse. Chu Luiyue was actually able to snatch energy from it for her own cultivation. Even he might not be able to do it. Moreover, Chu Luiyue was only a stage 5 warrior now. Taizu was dumbfounded. Chu Luiyue knew nothing about this. In her opinion, she was just absorbing the energy of heaven and earth around her to cultivate. Well, the speed of the water droplets' rotation seemed to be a little faster than before. 5 lines swayed gently on the water droplet. The crystal suddenly swayed and floated towards Chu Luiyue. Taizu sucked in a breath of cold air. Chu Luiyue was trying to snatch food from the tiger's mouth. Digression. Another mistake after writing. I almost lost the manuscript. After looking for it for a long time, I'm tired. Let's go eat. There's nothing to eat today. Dozens of demons have been eaten. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience from love. The Taizu looked at Chu Luiyue with a headache. He was both happy and worried. He was happy that Chu Luiyue's cultivation talent and potential seemed to be better than he had expected. After all, she was a descendant of his bloodline. The Taizu really didn't know how to dote on her now. He was worried that Chu Luiyue had devoured so much energy all of a sudden, and it was even taken from the Tutian baby. Would she really be fine? If that thing exploded, even his old bones wouldn't be able to help much. He turned his gaze slightly and looked at the red-tailed phoenix that was guarding Chu Luiyue. It had been standing there from the beginning. At some point in time, its body was enveloped in a layer of dark green light. It was Chu Luiyue's contracted magical beast. Naturally, it would be affected when Chu Luiyue's strength increased. However, compared to his worries, the red-tailed phoenix retracted its wings and closed its eyes. It seemed to be much more at ease. It was as if it wasn't worried that anything would happen to Chu Luiyue. But right at this moment, a loud boom suddenly came from the crystal. The Taizu immediately turned around and was shocked to see that the last seal on it had finally dissipated. The crystal began to vibrate slightly. In an instant, the surrounding light began to surge back towards the crystal. The light that had filled the entire space retreated at a speed visible to the naked eye like a receding tide. Soon, the surroundings dimmed and finally fell into complete darkness. The Taizu's heart tightened as he took a step closer to Chu Luiyue. The aura around his body instantly accumulated. At this moment, the air seemed to have completely frozen. Just as the Taizu was about to think of a way to bring Chu Luiyue away from this place, a speck of starlight suddenly appeared in the darkness. Gradually, the speck of starlight began to expand. The light lit up and it was indeed the same crystal. However, at this moment, there was only a faint green glow left on the crystal. For some reason, the Taizu felt that this light was different from the one he had seen before. A halo of light spread out from the crystal. Wherever it passed, space collapsed. A large patch of darkness appeared. The halo of light was transparent and revealed an extremely light layer of green. The Taizu knew that something was wrong. Just as he was about to exert his strength, he suddenly realized that his strength was completely suppressed and could not be used at all. Soon, the halo of light spread to this side and gently passed through the translucent soul of the Taizu. Then it arrived in front of Chu Luiyue and enveloped her. To the Taizu's relief, this did not seem to have any effect on Chu Luiyue. When the halo of light spread to the edge of the surrounding stone walls, it finally stopped. If someone were to look down from above, this place would look like a huge green amber. The Taizu looked up and saw an endless darkness. He frowned slightly. The Tutian baby should have swallowed all the energy from the outside world. Next, he was afraid that, buzz. After a short moment of silence, the crystal trembled even more violently. It seemed that the Tutian baby wanted to completely break free from it. The Taizu stared at it closely, his heart in his throat. This Tutian baby was not as big as the one he had seen before, and its power should not be as terrifying. However, if it really came out, it would be difficult to control it. Within the halo of light, all the energy from the outside world had already been divided up by Chu Luiyue and the Tutian baby. A crazy suction force spread out from the crystal. It seemed that it wanted to take back the energy in Chu Luiyue's body. The black shield in front of Chu Luiyue began to shake because of the cracks in the ground. At this moment, Chu Luiyue suddenly opened her eyes. 2 red flames were burning in her eyes. She stared at the Tutian baby and slowly raised her hand. A transparent water droplet suddenly appeared in front of her. She gently moved her hand forward. Bang! The water droplet splashed. In an instant, it condensed into a water curtain in front of her. That terrifying suction force was immediately blocked outside. Chu Luiyue's hand moved slightly and made a grabbing motion in the air. The crystal was actually coming toward her. Mobile users, Please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 761. However, the crystal seemed to have sensed the danger and released an extremely strong aura. In the end, it stopped 10 steps away from the water curtain. But this time it didn't try to snatch Chu Liyue's power. Chu Liyue tried again and realized that she couldn't make it move forward, so she gave up. She stared at the crystal for a while and chuckled. I hate it when people snatch my things. As if it was afraid, the crystal suddenly took a step back. Taizu? What's going on? It's different from what I expected again. The two Tian baby is hidden in the crystal, but it's actually afraid of Chu Liyue? Even though Taizu had seen how domineering Chu Liyue was when she dealt with Tianlei, he still felt that the impact was too great and hard to digest. To be honest, although this thing was the one who pulled Chu Liyue down, it was actually Chu Liyue who was snatching its energy now. After all, the energy that Chu Liyue swallowed was collected by this two Tian baby. However, Chu Liyue was so self-righteous as if the two Tian baby was really taking advantage of her. Taizu felt a headache coming on again. He had stayed in the Tianling god realm for thousands of years, but he didn't know when the two Tian baby had become so cowardly. Has the world really changed? Taizu looked at the crystal with a complicated expression and found it hard to accept. He could even clearly hear the sound of something collapsing in his heart. Ever since he got together with Chu Liyue, this kind of thing happened from time to time. Many things in the world have become inconceivable. Most importantly, she herself seems to be used to it and doesn't think she's that cruel. There probably aren't many people in the entire continent who would dare to threaten the two Tian baby with this kind of tone. Taizu looked at the scene in front of him and fell into deep thought. Of course, the two Tian baby wouldn't be afraid of a stage 5 warrior. The key should be that water curtain. This water curtain wasn't big and was only about the height of a person. It just happened to appear in front of Chu Liyue and separated her from the two Tian baby. The two Tian baby seemed to be very afraid of this water curtain and refused to get close to it. It didn't even hesitate to give up the energy that Chu Liyue had swallowed. After a short silence, the crystal began to vibrate again. But this time, compared to before, he was much more restrained. The surrounding space gradually became viscous. Chu Liyue's eyes narrowed. However, the great ancestor seemed to have suddenly thought of something and gasped in shock. Taizu, what's wrong? Asked Chu Liyue in confusion. Taizu, to the crystal, to the crystal, to the crystal, to the crystal, 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 the crystal, the crystal, 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 crystal. It controls this space. Have you noticed that this place seems to be different? Chu Liyue nodded. The speed of the energy flow seems to have slowed down. Taizu paused and said with difficulty. This is because the flow of time here has slowed down. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She knew what this meant. Legend had it that those who had broken through to stage 9 could create their own divine territory. And in that divine territory, everything could be controlled at will, including the flow of time. The stronger one was, the more amazing their control in this aspect. There were many benefits to slowing down the flow of time. For example, cultivators could enter it to cultivate, and they could also cultivate some natural treasures. If one day in the outside world was equivalent to 10 days in the divine territory, then it was equivalent to increasing one's cultivation speed by 10 times. Medicinal herbs that took 100 years to grow could be harvested in 10 years. In short, the benefits were countless. But wasn't that something that only the legendary top powerhouses could do? Even someone as strong as Taizu only left behind an incomplete Tianling divine territory back then, and he couldn't do this. And this two Tian baby? Rumor has it that the two Tian baby can do this. Taizu frowned and nodded. Only then did Chu Liyue realize that the two Tian baby seemed to be stronger than she had imagined. It probably wants to trap you here. The long time would probably be very difficult to endure. If Chu Liyue couldn't endure it, it would give it a chance. At that time, this is good. Chu Liyue's eyes lit up as she said happily. What? Taizu was confused. You're not worried that it will trap you here forever? It was dark here and she was alone. Even if she wasn't afraid, wouldn't she feel lonely after a long time? One had to know that being in such an environment for a long time could definitely drive people crazy. Even with him around, it wouldn't be easy to endure. Who knew when they would be able to get out? Chu Liyue blinked and smiled. What's there to worry about? I think we can take advantage of this opportunity to cultivate. Can you tell how much slower the flow of time here is compared to the outside world? Taizu hesitated for a moment and said, probably. A day in the outside world is equivalent to a month here. But here there is no sun or moon, so it should be difficult to know how much time has passed. Chu Liyue smiled and took out an hourglass from her universe ring. That's not a problem. This hourglass counts for an entire day, and it will automatically turn over when it's full. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to help me pay more attention in the future. She entered a cultivation state and had no concept of time. With Taizu's help, it would be much more convenient. Taizu clicked his tongue. You have a lot of things with you. You even have this. Chu Luiyue coughed. In fact, she didn't prepare this for herself. When Rongxiu gave her the universe ring, she had a lot of things with her. She had checked it when she was bored. In addition to money and all kinds of treasures, there were many miscellaneous things in it. Among them was this hourglass. She didn't expect it to come in handy at this time. Since you've already made up your mind, I won't say anything more. As you said, this is indeed a rare opportunity. As long as you can get out of here in the end, it won't be a problem. Chu Luiyue nodded. Don't worry, I know what to do. Compared to ordinary people and even most cultivation geniuses, her cultivation speed was already extremely fast. But it was far from enough. The opponents she had to face were the most powerful people in the Tianling dynasty, who could almost cover the sky with one hand. Even if she had a lot of trump cards, she was still inferior to them. Now that she could take advantage of this opportunity to improve her cultivation speed, she was naturally very happy. As for Taizu's worry about whether she could get through it, he had experienced so much pain and torment in the past. What did this mean to him now? Chu Luiyue closed her eyes and put her hands on her knees, palms facing up. The water curtain swayed gently. Crack. On the crystal, a fragment suddenly fell down. Digression. At 6 o'clock, mobile users please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 762. The fragment was very thin, only the size of a fingernail. It looked very inconspicuous. However, when Taizu saw this scene, a trace of shock flashed across his face. Without the suppression of the seal, the crystal began to shatter. Just as he was extremely nervous, he saw the fragment flying towards Chu Luiyue. The fragment was pale green, crystal clear, and contained an extremely majestic power. Wherever it passed, the viscous space was almost cut apart. Just like that, it slowly and steadily flew to the front of the water curtain. Then an amazing scene happened. The fragment did not directly pass through the water curtain. Instead, it gradually melted silently. Soon, a faint green color appeared on the transparent water curtain. Then a faint green water droplet gently condensed and flew towards Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue swallowed the water droplet naturally, and then converted the energy contained in it into her own force. The aura on her body strengthened again. The whole process was smooth and there was no pause at all. Taizu opened his mouth, but suddenly felt that he was at a loss for words. Wasn't Chu Luiyue equivalent to swallowing the power accumulated by the Tutian baby in a disguised form? Did he just take the energy from the crystal for himself just like that? Looking at Chu Luiyue's calm face, and even her complexion was a little rosy, Taizu suddenly felt that his previous worries were unnecessary. The heaven-wrecking holy seed is formidable, but when it meets Chu Luiyue who doesn't play by the rules, it was still unknown who would be able to outplay the other. Taizu thought for a moment, and simply retreated a few steps from the position in front of Chu Luiyue to the right front of her, making it easier for her to snatch the power of the Tutian baby more smoothly. Looking at the red-tailed phoenix, who was very calm from the beginning to the end, Taizu faintly thought that it should have known that Chu Luiyue would do such a thing. As expected, he took after his master. His arrogant and disdainful temperament was exactly the same. After putting down the initial worry in his heart, Taizu calmed down a lot and began to stand by the side. Watch the show. Chu Luiyue was slowly killing time in the god's domain created by the Tutian baby. She was currently unable to leave, nor was she able to contact anyone from the outside world. She could only focus on her cultivation. On the other hand, Qin Yi and the rest didn't know about her current situation, so they were naturally very worried. Qin Yi felt a little uneasy as he stared at the faint dark green glow emitting from the broken branches. The inexplicable crack on the tree trunk made him tense up. The seal should have been completely destroyed. He remembered clearly that Chu Luiyue had been swallowed by the same color of light below. From the looks of it, it was very likely that they had already surged up from underground. If it were to erupt, it would be extremely dangerous. This made him even more worried about Chu Luiyue's current condition. Qin Yi held his breath and focused as he walked forward step by step and stood still in front of the tree trunk. This mother tree was very thick and strong. Standing in front of this tree trunk, he seemed very small. The leaves on the tree trunk had all fallen off cleanly. Standing close to the tree trunk, he could see countless tiny cracks on it. Every crack was filled with that strange light. It seemed like it would burst out the next moment. Qin Yi's muscles tensed up as he stretched his hand forward. However, before he could touch the tree trunk, the light suddenly dimmed. In just a split second, all the light in the tiny cracks disappeared. Soundless. This one Xuanhuan also finally stopped curling up and withered. The surroundings were so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Qin Yi paused for a moment. A silver light flashed in his hand and a sword appeared. He stared straight ahead as he held the sword with both hands and slowly but firmly slashed it down. Crack. The sword glinted coldly. A layer of bark was sliced off. A deep sword mark was left on the tree trunk. Qin Yi focused his gaze and realized that all the energy in the tree trunk had been swallowed, and it had become much more brittle because of its withered state. However, most of it couldn't be seen. That frightening aura seemed to have dissipated as well. After waiting for a while, there was silence and nothing happened. A light breeze blew over and Qin Yi felt a chill on his back. He closed his eyes, kept his sword, and slowly retreated. Mu Hongyu and the rest watched nervously from behind. They didn't even dare to blink, afraid that they would miss something. Everyone was shocked when they saw Qin Yi actually turn around after sending out the sword. Lei Laosi couldn't hold it in and took 2 steps forward first. He hurriedly asked, "Big brother, how is it?" Qin Yi shook his head. Lei Laosi's face turned pale. The other people's expressions also froze. Qin Yi sighed and explained, "I can't be sure. What we can be sure of is that she is currently trapped by a strange force and is unable to come out. Originally that force should have rushed out, but for some reason, it retreated instead." Lei Laosi was dazed. "Big brother, you mean, you should still remember the scene when we first came here, right?" Qin Yi glanced at him and squinted his eyes slightly. Back then the same thing happened to this mother tree. A force wanted to rush out, but that 9-colored heavenly pheasant appeared and repaired the seal, so that incident was left unsettled. Lei Laosi's eyes flickered and he nodded. In actual fact, the situation back then wasn't completely like that. How could the 9-colored heavenly pheasant do this alone? However, there was no need to tell these children this. So, is it still because of that 9-colored heavenly pheasant this time? No, it's already broken through to become a red-tailed phoenix. Perhaps, it became even stronger? Qin Yi nodded. It's not impossible. When Mu Hongyu and the rest heard this, they heaved a sigh of relief. This means that Lu Yu still has a high chance of coming out? The red-tailed phoenix is a legendary fiend. It should be able to help her, right? Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran were both optimistic. Only Chang Wanzhou looked deeply at Qin Yi, pressed his lips tightly together and didn't say anything. I've seen that scene before. The red-tailed phoenix definitely isn't a match for that force. However, Qin Yi clearly didn't want Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran to know about this. Then what should we do now? Can we only wait here for Lu Yu? Asked Yi Ranran with a frown. Qin Yi turned around and looked at that mother tree. Let's hope so. At the border where the mystic forest and mirror lake connected, the appearance of the dancing lotus made xuanhuan and the rest very excited. She immediately suggested for Mu Qinghe to retrieve the dancing lotus. Once she said that, the originally noisy surroundings instantly quietened down. Everyone looked at Mu Qinghe with different expressions. Curious, envious, worried, everyone knew that Mirror Lake was dangerous. The first to go would definitely be the first to bear the brunt. Mu Qinghe kept quiet for a while and nodded. Yes. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 763. Then Mu Qinghe turned around and walked in the direction of the dancing lotus. The boundary between the mystic forest and the mirror lake was very clear. In the middle was something like a dam. On one side was the thick ground of the mystic forest that was filled with fallen leaves, and on the other side was the mirror lake that was glistening with water. Surprisingly, the isolated dam was only an inch wide, but none of the leaves from the mystic forest flew to the lake on the other side. The waves on the lake also did not cross the dam and flow to the other side. There seemed to be an invisible barrier in the middle that separated the two sides clearly. Mu Qinghe soon arrived at the narrow dam. He took a deep breath, circulated the force in his body and swung his right hand. A long sword flew out. It floated in front of him. Mu Qinghe jumped and stood on the flying sword. Just as he was about to ride the sword forward, he inadvertently glanced at the lake and found that there seemed to be something sparkling on the surface of the lake. He squinted his eyes and looked over. Then he was stunned on the spot, because the sparkling thing was actually a piece of floating ice. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on it, and the clear, glass-like floating ice reflected the bright and dazzling light. The Mirror Lake was vast and boundless. Its borders were close to the Mystic Forest and the Red Moon Desert. It was like spring and summer all year round, and the water rippled. Why would such a piece of floating ice suddenly appear? Vice Admiral Mu, is there a problem? Xuanhuan saw that Mu Qinghe was not moving and could not help but urge him. Mu Qinghe did not respond immediately. Instead he looked around. Sure enough, he saw another piece of floating ice not far away. This piece of floating ice was quietly floating on the surface of the lake. It was inconspicuous. If not for the fact that Mu Qinghe happened to be standing in the sky in the afterglow of the setting sun, he would definitely not have noticed it. For example, xuanhuan and the others did not see this strange situation. Mu Qinghe felt a little uneasy. This mirror lake is strange. Xuanhuan frowned. What's strange? Mu Qinghe raised her hand and pointed. Floating ice has never appeared in Mirror Lake before. Xuanhuan looked at Mu Qinghe's serious expression and thought that something big had happened. Who would have thought that it was only because of one or two pieces of floating ice? She chuckled and said calmly, "That's right. It's just 2 pieces of floating ice. It shouldn't be a big deal, right? If Vice Admiral Mu is really worried, why don't we get the Dancing Lotus back as soon as possible and leave immediately?" Mu Qinghe's frown deepened. "Third Princess, you may not know this, but this Mirror Lake has always been like this for a long time. There has never been such a situation before. I'm afraid that something strange has happened." Elder Qiushi, since you want the Dancing Lotus so much, why don't you go first? Elder Qiushi was a little scared. His gaze wandered back and forth between Mu Qinghe and the Dancing Lotus. He was in a dilemma. He really wanted to retrieve the Dancing Lotus, but he was also afraid that something would happen. Mu Qinghe's reaction really didn't make one feel at ease. Seeing that the two of them had stopped, Xuanhuan couldn't help but urge them. Elder Qiushi made up his mind. There were so many people here anyway. What was there to worry about? If he was the one who retrieved the Dancing Lotus, his status would definitely rise when he returned to West Hill. At the thought of this, the balance in his heart finally leaned towards the side of greed. He walked past Mu Qinghe and approached. However, he wasn't stupid. He didn't use his hands to retrieve it. Such a treasure was definitely not that easy to obtain. He waved his sleeve and threw out a rope as thick as a thumb, wrapping it around the branch of the Dancing Lotus. After waiting for a moment, there was nothing unusual. Elder Qiushi felt a little more confident. He pulled his wrist back, trying to pull the Dancing Lotus out. However, just as he moved, the rope slid down the branch. Elder Qiushi missed his target. He looked up in shock and realized that the branch was extremely smooth. There was a faint luster on it, and it was indeed very difficult to bind it with a rope. He thought for a moment and set up a barrier around himself. At the same time, he put away the rope and used his sword. He approached step by step and finally raised his sword to slash. However, just as the sword came into contact with the branch, it actually slipped. Before Elder Qiushi could react, his body was pulled down by an invisible force. Plop. It penetrated the ice layer and fell into the lake. Digression, 6:30 p.m. February has been abolished. Sob 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 sob. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 764. A hole instantly appeared on the smooth and flat ice surface. A few drops of lake water splashed out, but Elder Qiushi's figure had already completely sunk into the lake and disappeared. In fact, he didn't even have the time to cry out in alarm. Mu Qinghe, who was standing closest to him, had a change in expression, and his pupils constricted. The entire thing happened too suddenly. Before he could react, everything had already ended. He didn't even have the chance to take action. When Xuanhuan and the rest, who were standing far away, saw this scene, they were all stunned on the spot. Especially Xuanhuan. She was originally waiting happily and expectantly for Elder Qiushi to retrieve the Dancing Lotus. She was about to succeed, but she didn't expect. She didn't even see what exactly happened. Just now. Wasn't everything fine? In just the blink of an eye, Elder Qiushi suddenly fell into the water. Xuanhuan widened her eyes in shock. After Elder Qiushi fell into the water, he didn't make a single sound. Especially now, when the water surface seemed to have regained its calmness. Under normal circumstances, anyone who fell into the water would struggle and ask for help. But Elder Qiushi didn't. There's only one possibility: he's already dead. In that short moment, Xuanhuan clutched her chest, and her footsteps faltered as she instinctively grabbed Jiang Yuqing's arm. "Yuqing W, what happened just now?" Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows tightly and spoke in a low voice. He seemed to have been dragged down by something. but I didn't see it clearly either. Xuanhuan's throat was dry, and she felt both fearful and relieved. Luckily, I didn't go over personally just now. If not, I would be the one dead. But Elder Qiushi is a stage 7 warrior. How can it be? To be able to take his life in such a short period of time, it's enough to show how scary it is. If it were someone else, they might die even faster than me. Jiang Yuqing's face was also very dark. Elder Duanmu-chan is already gone. Now even Elder Qiushi is. This trip was much more dangerous than he had expected. Xuanhuan lowered her eyes and her eyes flashed. She was the one who killed Elder Duanmu-chan, but Jiang Yuqing didn't seem to know. He probably thought that she would only attack these young geniuses, right? Little did they know that she had long found Elder Duanmu-chan an eyesore. This was because Duanmu-chan was not her confidant, and he had always been on good terms with Xuanhuan. Elder Duanmu-chan had an amiable temperament. Although he was an elder of the royal family, he had never participated in the affairs of the royal family. Even though Xuanhuan admired him back then, he did not become her man. He had always kept to himself. He was still the same when he came to Xuanhuan. Most people wouldn't care, but Xuanhuan couldn't stand it. Moreover, he always used Xuanhuan's standards when she was in power to measure everything she did. This violated Xuanhuan's taboo. Therefore, she might as well take this opportunity to get rid of Elder Duanmu-chan. However, this was not important. Anyway, many people had died in her hands. One more didn't make a difference. Those who couldn't be used by her were dead. It was a pity that Elder Qiushi died. After the initial shock, she finally regained her senses. She looked at Mu Qinghe with suppressed anger. Vice Admiral Mu, what's going on? You were close to Elder Qiushi. Why didn't you help? She even suspected that Mu Qinghe did it on purpose. He had always disliked Elder Qiushi. Mu Qinghe said coldly. The last general also wanted to help, but he didn't have the strength. Even Elder Qiushi didn't have the strength to retaliate. Could it be that Your Highness, the third princess, thought that this general was still some distance away from Elder Qiushi just now? Could it be that this general could reach him first if he made a move later? Xuanhuan choked. Mu Qinghe's words made sense. Everyone clearly saw the situation just now. Mu Qinghe probably didn't have time to help. The last general already said that there's something wrong with Mirror Lake. Now you finally believe it, right? Mu Qinghe's words made Xuanhuan's face turn red and white. Wasn't saying this in front of so many people the same as publicly criticizing her? Mu Qinghe took one last look at the spot where Elder Qiushi disappeared. There seemed to be a faint green light flashing by. He narrowed his eyes and was about to take a closer look when a layer of ice formed on the surface again. That ice hole was quickly repaired and looked exactly the same as before. It was impossible to tell that it had once shattered and that a person had fallen in. More and more layers of ice began to form on the surface of the lake in the distance. Mu Qinghe said in a low voice. Third princess, eldest young master, it's better for us to leave Mirror Lake as soon as possible. In the quiet and sticky space, Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged and was cultivating peacefully. Not far away on the opposite side, the crystal quietly floated. Suddenly, the layer of faint green light on the outside fluctuated. Then, a faint green light passed through the light and headed toward the crystal. Chu Luiyue seemed to have sensed something and opened her eyes. Seeing the light, she raised her eyebrows slightly and muttered softly. It has a lot of tricks up its sleeve. The energy in the mystic forest should have been completely devoured by it. She didn't expect it to be able to get such an abundant energy. Chu Luiyue's red lips curved. With a slight thought, the water curtain shook gently. The ball of light was about to fly to the crystal and was about to merge with it. However, when the water curtain moved, the ball of light also seemed to be pulled by something and flew over in a wobbly manner. Like the previous fragment, the light silently merged with the water curtain and finally turned into a water droplet and arrived in front of Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue's eyes curved. Since you're so polite, I'll kindly accept it. After saying that, she swallowed the energy of the water droplet. Taizu, who was standing at the side, raised his eyebrows fiercely and glanced at the crystal. It was trembling slightly. It wasn't the kind that wanted to break out forcefully. It was because of anger. Digression, I didn't add any new chapters today. Because I ate the updated chapters. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 765. For the first time, Taizu felt that the two-tian baby was a little pitiful. It had finally broken the seal, and just as it was about to break out, Chu Luiyue appeared out of nowhere. Not only did she snatch the energy it had gathered, she even snatched it several times. It didn't know how she had gotten this energy, or if Chu Luiyue had forcibly snatched it away. Who wouldn't be angry when the duck in their mouth flew away? The key point was that Taizu was still afraid of Chu Luiyue. If it wasn't for the water curtain, Taizu believed that Chu Luiyue would definitely not be a match for the two Tian baby. But how could there be so many ifs in the world? Speaking of which, it was Taizu who had forcibly pulled Chu Luiyue down. It was just asking for trouble. Taizu put his hands in his sleeves and laughed. According to the current development of the situation, the chances of the two Tian baby coming out were even slimmer. It was hard to say who would be able to endure who. Chu Luiyue's aura was still increasing. She carefully and patiently refined all of this energy, transforming it into her own force. Her flesh, blood, tendons, and bones became more and more resilient under the cleansing of this pure energy. Time slowly passed. At a certain moment, Chu Luiyue's aura skyrocketed. Crack. A slight sound came from within her body. Chu Luiyue's strength had finally advanced to the middle stage of stage 5. Taizu noticed this movement and subconsciously glanced at the hourglass next to him, a trace of shock flashing through his eyes. Chu Luiyue's breakthrough speed was too fast. Although he had already mentally prepared himself, it was still hard to believe that Chu Luiyue had smoothly and quickly crossed the threshold of the middle stage. She had the Daijingyuan meridian. Although it couldn't be compared to the Tianjingyuan meridian, her cultivation speed was obviously faster than the average Daijingyuan meridian cultivator. Taizu put his hands behind his back and looked at Chu Luiyue with a solemn gaze. When she was xuanhuan, her cultivation had reached the peak of a rank 8 warrior and she was only one step away from becoming a rank 9 warrior. With such an experience, Chu Luiyue would undoubtedly take fewer detours when she cultivated in this life. Plus, she had many heaven-defying opportunities. Taizu sighed softly, his eyes flashing with admiration. Although it was a pity that Chu Luiyue didn't have the Tianjingyuan meridian, she had been able to come so far. He wondered what realm she would be able to reach by the time she got out of here. The outside world had no way of knowing what was happening underground. At this moment, Shangguan Yang faced a dilemma. On one hand, Yu of the lotus flower. On the other hand, he hadn't obtained the dancing lotus yet. It would be a pity to leave just like that. After Mu Qinghe said that, everyone fell silent and looked at Shangguan Yu. Even the sect disciples who had been admiring the beautiful scenery of Mirror Lake and were full of yearning were now nervous. In the beginning, no one took Mu Qinghe's warning to heart. But when something happened to Elder Qiushi, they immediately understood that this place was completely different from what they had expected. Mu Qinghe's words weren't alarmist words. She might even have been tactful. They came to the great desolate swamp mostly for the treasures here. But the premise was that they had to be alive. The dancing lotus was indeed a rare treasure, but if they had to pay with their lives for it, no one would continue to do it. Shangguan Yu also knew this. At this time, it wasn't appropriate for her to send anyone. That would be sending them to their deaths. But she really wanted to get the dancing lotus. Jiang Yuqing saw that she seemed to be very conflicted and could roughly guess her thoughts. Everyone saw the scene just now. This Mirror Lake is indeed strange. If we stay any longer, I'm afraid the casualties will be even more serious. It's better to evacuate first. Anyway, the dancing lotus is here and it will bloom for a few years. Let's go back to Xiling first and think of a way to get it later. Shangguan Yu was still a little hesitant. But, what if something happens during this time? You've seen how difficult it is to deal with the dancing lotus. Even Elder Qiushi couldn't escape. Who can easily take it away? Shangguan Yu thought about it and felt that his words made sense. In the entire Tianling dynasty, there weren't many people who were stronger than Elder Qiushi. As long as the news of the dancing lotus's appearance wasn't leaked, there shouldn't be too much of a problem. Jiang Yuqing looked at her and his voice became gentler. Also, you need to go back and recuperate as soon as possible. It won't delay anything if you come back after you've recovered. These words finally convinced Shangguan Yu. Her body and face both needed to be recuperated. With the Mirror Lake in this state, she definitely wouldn't have the chance to make a move on anyone. It was better to go back to Xiling first. Perhaps she could find a suitable person and opportunity. She thought for a moment and finally nodded. Okay. After Shangguan Yu agreed, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. The two royal elders who came with them had both died. The danger of the Dahuang swamp was obvious. If they were a little unlucky, they might be the ones who died. Under Mu Qinghe's command, everyone began to evacuate. However, compared to the excitement they had when they came, everyone now looked dejected and disappointed. They had all come with all kinds of expectations, but who knew that they would end up with nothing and almost lose their lives? Because there were more injured people, Zhu Hong and the others from Dragon Teeth Mountain walked at the back. However, compared to the other sects, they were luckier. Although they had many injured people, their survival rate was extremely high. No one died. Just this point alone was enough to make people envious. After all, the disciples who came here were all famous geniuses from various sections. The death of any one of them was a great loss to them. However, the most miserable was not the few weaker sects in Tianji Manor, but the Purple Xiao Sword sect. They came with 10 people. When they returned, only 3 people were left. One of them was even the Purple Xiao Sword sect's young master, Song Qingyin. Although the remaining 2 saved their lives, they were seriously injured. Their future cultivation might be affected. Who would have thought that the high-spirited Purple Xiao Sword sect would end up like this in the end? The sky had already completely darkened. A bright moon rose into the sky, scattering its light. Everyone traveled for a long time and finally returned to the border area of the 3 places. Standing here again, everyone's mood was already completely different from before. On the left, the once lush mystic forest had already become a wilderness. The ground was rugged and uneven. Withered branches and withered leaves covered it, mixed with withered tree trunks and festering tree roots. At a glance, it was like a ghost domain. A sinister aura enveloped the area. Just looking at it from afar made one shudder. Zhu Hong could not help but look at Mu Qinghe and ask softly, "Vice Admiral Mu Hongyu and the rest are still inside. Shall we wait for them?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 766. As soon as he said that, the people nearby fell silent for a moment. They all looked over with different expressions. Mu Qinghe looked serious and did not answer immediately. Instead, it was Xuanhuan who heard the commotion and narrowed her eyes dangerously, asking deliberately, "Vice Admiral Mu, what are you talking about?" Mu Qinghe knew that she could actually hear them, but she asked deliberately. However, he still lowered his head slightly and said word by word, "Mu Hongyu and the others have not returned yet. Your Highness, should we wait here for a while and bring them back to West Hill?" Xuanhuan widened her eyes slightly as if she was very surprised. "They're not here yet? It's been a long time. Haven't they given up?" She did not need to say the rest of the sentence. Everyone knew what she meant. The surroundings were silent. Zhu Hong could not help but argue. "Your Highness, they're in the mystic forest. They probably don't know that we're planning to go back. They didn't even hear the news. How could they rush here?" Xuanhuan was deliberately making things difficult for them. "Oh, I see. I was only thinking about retrieving the dancing lotus to treat my father's illness. I forgot about these things." Xuanhuan reacted quickly and immediately defended herself. She glanced at Zhu Hong with gloomy eyes and said meaningfully, "It seems that Dragon Teeth Mountain and Chongshu Pavilion are really close. You're still thinking about them at this time." Zhu Hong straightened his back and said frankly, "Lu Yu saved the people of Dragon Teeth Mountain. We all owe her a favor. Moreover, Hongyu is also there. Naturally, we are worried." Xuanhuan choked. Before she could speak, Zhu Hong continued, "Your Highness, we beg you to release the signal immediately and summon them back. We'll leave together when they return. The Dahuang swamp is full of danger. If they stay here alone, I'm afraid." Xuanhuan was impatient and interrupted him. "If they don't come back, are we going to let so many people wait here forever?" "Zhu Hong, I know what you're thinking, but you have to know that the big picture is more important." Zhu Hong choked. Seeing that he had nothing to say, Xuanhuan brushed her hair behind her ear with satisfaction. Anyway, with Qin Yi and Lei Laosi around, nothing should happen to them. Right now, everyone is gravely injured. Many people's injuries cannot be delayed. With that, she turned around to leave. Whoosh, the sharp sound of something breaking through the air suddenly rang in his ears. Xuanhuan turned her head in astonishment, only to see Jiang Yuqing holding a jade tube in his hand. Bang! Above the sky, a loud bang suddenly exploded. She looked up and saw a brilliant firework blooming in the night sky. Because it was nighttime, it was even more conspicuous. Even if Mu Hongyu and the others were in the mystic forest, they should be able to see it. Rest here for 2 hours. Therefore, even if he wasn't as focused on cultivation as Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran, his cultivation was still slowly improving. Gradually, a thin layer of frost covered Chang Wanzhou's body. Even the ground beneath his feet was covered in a layer of ice. A chilly aura was emitted from his body, but the cloud sky copper sword kept burning with a sparrow blue flame. The cloud sky copper sword contained Chu Liyue's strength, so he could use this method to sense her aura more clearly. Just like that, Xuanhuan waited for Chu Liyue under the two extreme forces, one cold and one hot, while increasing his strength. What's wrong with this fellow? Lei Laosi finally noticed that something was amiss and couldn't help but mumble. I've never seen someone cultivate like this. Qini narrowed his eyes. There should be a cold aura in his body, and this cold aura contains a large amount of strength. As long as he dispels this cold aura, his strength will naturally increase. Lei Laosi secretly thought that his big brother's eyes were sharp and couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. Big brother, you're not a celestial physician, so how do you know this? Qini smiled lightly. It's just a guess. When Xuanhuan heard this voice, he finally turned to look at the two of them. His gaze stopped on Qinyi's face for a moment, and his brows, which were covered by his short blonde hair, knitted slightly as he subconsciously became alert. Other than myself, only Chu Liyue knows about my body's condition. Qini, how did he know? He said that it was a guess, but Xuanhuan didn't quite believe it. This guess was way too accurate. As though he saw through Xuanhuan's suspicion, Qini raised his brows. You don't have to look at me like that. I've seen a similar example in a book before. When I saw your situation, I naturally thought of it. A shocked expression flashed across Xuanhuan's face. After hesitating for a moment, he finally spoke and asked hesitantly, You said, you saw a similar situation like mine in a book before? Qini nodded. According to the records, that person successfully dispelled the cold aura in his body and broke through to become a top warrior. However, the process was very difficult, and normal people wouldn't be able to persevere. Actually, what he didn't say was that there wasn't only one example in that book. In actual fact, there were hundreds and thousands of people who encountered such a situation. Out of so many people, only one succeeded in the end. Those who didn't all died. This meant that there should be many people like that other than Xuanhuan. However, Xuanhuan should be the only one who managed to survive. However, he clearly didn't know anything about this. Xuanhuan pressed his lips together. What book is that? Can I take a look? Ever since he could remember, his body had been like this. He had no parents, no relatives, and no friends. Chapter 768. Xuanhuan shook his head. I don't know either. He only knew that there was a seal in his body, but he didn't know when it appeared or who set it up. Also, this seal itself was very strange. If other people had a seal in their body, it would usually be used to suppress their force. However, this wasn't the case for his seal. It even froze because of the strong yin aura. Until now, Xuanhuan still didn't know what the seal was used for. He had once thought of removing it, but he had tried many methods, but the seal remained unaffected. In the end, when he saw that the seal didn't move, he decided to just put this matter aside. He didn't expect Qini to actually see through it. Also, he seemed to be very anxious. Disappointment flashed across Qinyi's eyes when he heard Xuanhuan's reply. He walked to Xuanhuan and wanted to take a closer look to confirm if it was what he had guessed. However, the seal pattern had already disappeared. Seeing Qini staring at his glabella, Xuanhuan instantly understood something. There's something on my head? After confirming that the seal wouldn't appear again, he sighed in his heart and nodded. It just flashed, so I didn't see it clearly. Xuanhuan scrutinized his expression and asked tentatively, What's the matter? You've seen the seal before? Qini kept quiet for a while before replying softly. I think so, but the impression is a little blurry. Plus, I didn't see it clearly. I can't quite recall it. Xuanhuan was skeptical. If that seal really appeared on my glabella, Qinyi's eyes would have been filled with shock the moment he saw it. That kind of expression definitely wasn't something that someone who couldn't recall would have. I don't want to talk about it? Why is that? However, Xuanhuan didn't continue asking. Qini looked at him with a complicated gaze before retracting his gaze. After a while he said, As your abilities increase, that seal will definitely appear again. Just be more careful. If there are any abnormalities, inform me as soon as possible. His tone was a little solemn. Xuanhuan thought for a moment and gently nodded. The few people around him were a little confused by this scene and looked over one after another. Lei Laosi couldn't help but ask. Big brother, what's wrong? Qini shook his head. Nothing. Since he denied it like this, the others naturally couldn't continue to say anything. Lei Laosi was a little perturbed. His elder brother had always been calm and composed. Except for the time when he heard that something had happened to His Highness, He had almost never seen him so emotional. He didn't see the seal that flashed across Changwanzhou's head. He didn't know what it was that made his big brother lose his composure like this. After this small commotion, the group quieted down again. Only Qin Yi remained calm on the surface, but his heart was in turmoil. If he was not mistaken, His Highness shouldn't know about this yet. When he had the chance, he had to inform her as soon as possible. An hour was gone in a flash. The direction of the mystic forest was silent. Mu Hongyu and the others were still nowhere to be seen. The hope in Zhu Hong and the others' eyes gradually dimmed. It's already so late, yet they still aren't here. They definitely don't intend to leave with us. Many people at the side also revealed regretful and disappointed expressions. They originally hoped that Chu Luiyue and the others could appear together. It's time, right? Asked xuanhuan. At this point she had already calmed down. As Chu Luiyue and the others didn't come back on time, her mood was much better. This can only prove that Mu Hongyu and the others still haven't found Chu Luiyue. How can they find him? What a joke. Unless they flip the entire mystic forest upside down, there's still a slight possibility. However, by then Chu Luiyue would probably have rotted into a pile of bones. Jiang Yuqing looked down and hid the emotions in his eyes. Let's go. Mu Qinghe went forward and activated the transportation array. The group of people quickly disappeared. The cold moonlight sprinkled on the vast and boundless Dahuang swamp, bringing with it a bit of desolation and loneliness. Unknowingly, a red spot appeared on the moon. The red dot gradually expanded and soon, it covered the entire area without a sound. The originally bright and unparalleled moon completely turned blood red. It looked strange and strange. The hot and dry desert during the day became incomparably cold at night. The night wind blew and it was bone-chilling. Under the undulating sand dunes, something seemed to be agitating. Suddenly, an ethereal voice was heard. She's back? It was impossible to tell whether this voice was male or female. It was as pleasant as music and intoxicating. A moment later, sand rolled down from the sand dunes not far away, forming a quicksand and making rustling sounds. How is this possible? This seemed to be the voice of a baby. It sounded very young, but the tone was very mature with a trace of resentment. Back then she said that she would be back in a few days. In the end, a few years have passed and there's still no trace of her. How can a person who goes back on her words be trusted? I don't want to see her again in this life. If you don't want to see her, then why do you look outside every night of the red moon? Do you think we don't know what you've been doing all day? This time the one who spoke seemed to be an old man. His voice was old and had a bit of laziness. This desert has been stirred up by you. There's no peace in this place. The baby-like voice was silent for a long time before it said fiercely, so what if I'm looking? I just want to see how long she can drag it out. In this world, only she dares to lie to me like this. After scolding fiercely, it felt that it was not enough and muttered angrily. That damn girl. When I see her, I must teach her a good lesson. Let's see if she dares to run away again. If you want to hit her, you can hit her. I can't bear to hit her. The old man laughed. You old cunning man. Same to you. The voice that spoke at the beginning finally sounded again. That person seemed to chuckle and said slowly, what's the use of saying this now? The girl hasn't been seen yet. But, why did she go to the mystic forest? I haven't been here for a few years and you've even forgotten the rules. The baby-like voice scolded in a low voice, but then it stopped abruptly. Wait, there seems to be something wrong with the mystic forest? The other two were silent for a moment. That thing is coming out? The old man exclaimed. Why did she go there at this time? Didn't I tell her before? It seems that the girl's courage has grown a lot after not seeing her for a few years. The pleasant and ethereal voice seemed to be drifting with the wind. I'll go take a look myself. I'll go too. Why are you in such a hurry? Wait for me. The voices gradually quieted down. Only the subtle sound of sand flowing was left. The Red Moon Desert returned to peace again. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 769. On the other side of the mystic forest, a few people had sneaked into it. How long has it been? How did the mystic forest become like this? Someone came. I think it's Mu Qinghe and a bunch of black cavalry. Also, there are a few more that we haven't seen before. These people are really unlucky to come here and encounter such a situation. Wait, why is that sparrow gone? I think I smell the red-tailed phoenix. Did that sparrow successfully break through? How is that possible? That fellow is missing half of her soul. Wait, there seem to be a few more people in front? Those two silly fellows are still here? Why are there a few more little ones? That sparrow really seems to have broken through. But why do I feel like she's underground? Could it be that she's old, so her ears and eyes aren't working well? You're right. She's underground. I think she's with that thing, the one who said this was the elder. Once he said this, the other two instantly quietened down. After a moment, that baby-like voice sounded angrily. I told you to dig that thing out and give it to her. Give it to her. You just had to say that the timing wasn't right. Great, she really went down by herself now. If that girl bumps into it, I'll beat you up. There's nothing wrong with a child wanting something, but that thing isn't normal. If we really gave it to her directly, who knows what kind of trouble might have arisen. The pleasant voice didn't sound that anxious as it spoke slowly. I wonder who said that he wanted to teach that girl a lesson just now, but in the blink of an eye, he became angry with us because of her. Big Bao, you're really impressive. Try calling me Big Bao again? Little Bao? Damn pervert, you're courting death. Can the two of you fight further away? Don't disturb me from looking at the girl. Scram. Scram. This commotion didn't attract the attention of Qin Yi and the rest. The night was as cold as water. Everything here was no different from during the day. Yi Ranran and Mu Hongyu were already asleep. Xuanhuan was sitting cross-legged beside the two of them, the cloud sky copper sword lying across his knees. As Lei Laosi and Qin Yi had powerful cultivations, they didn't need to sleep. As long as they regulated their breathing, they could recover their energy. The two of them watched over Mu Hongyu and the others while looking at the completely withered xuanhuan. Suddenly, the wind in the forest became louder. On the mother tree, a branch broke and fell to the ground, making a sound. Lei Laosi suddenly jumped up. Oh. He glanced around nervously, but he didn't find anyone. Qin Yi rubbed his glabella helplessly. It's just a broken branch. It's not a big deal. Fourth brother, you're too tense. Lei Laosi looked over and scratched his head awkwardly. I see. I thought. He sighed, unable to hide his disappointment. Girl, you, digression, 12 o'clock, tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 770. Chu Liyue's heart seemed to have been touched by something. She looked up again. Although she still couldn't see anything clearly, she had an inexplicable feeling that she was being watched. That voice was definitely not her hallucination. That voice was calling her, and it sounded very intimate. However, that voice and tone were very unfamiliar. She seemed to have never heard it before. But somehow it seemed vaguely familiar. There weren't many people who could call her that, and those who had the ability to reach here were even fewer. Who was it? The moment Chu Liyue looked up, the three people who were originally filled with anticipation and joy were all stunned. It's been a few years. How did this girl's appearance change so much? And she looks much younger? Lan Xiao, who was at the front, crossed his arms and touched his chin with one hand as he said in a daze. He only knew that when one cultivated to a certain level, they would never age. But that depended on their age. If a 20-year-old and an 80-year-old crossed that threshold at the same time, there would naturally be a huge difference. Other than that, he had never heard of anyone who could rejuvenate themselves. Lan Xiao, your eyesight isn't as good as mine. That girl isn't a girl. Diwu Zhangzi stroked his white beard and chuckled. You haven't seen that girl for a few years and you actually forgot what she looks like? Let's see what you can say when she finds out. If it were any other time, Lan Zhan would definitely refute him. But at this moment he couldn't care less. His eyes were staring straight at the girl below, and his brows were slightly furrowed. That's not right. He naturally remembered what the girl looked like, and logically speaking he definitely wouldn't mistake her. But this girl, that's the girl. Dugu Mabao, who had been silent all this while, finally spoke. Although his tone was cold because his voice was too similar to a baby's, it sounded a little out of place, as if a child was pretending to be an adult. Lan Xiao and Diwu Zhangzi both fell silent for a moment. Although her appearance is different, the aura of this soul is definitely the same. Although Dugu Mabao had a bad temper, he had always been very accurate in this aspect. Since even he had said so, then it must be true. Diwu Zhangzi widened his eyes in shock and lowered his head to take a closer look. However, the girl had already retracted her gaze. From their position they could only see the top of her head. No wonder. When I first saw her, I subconsciously thought that she was a girl. I wasn't mistaken. Lan Xiao heaved a sigh of relief and glanced at Diwu Zhangzi. I didn't recognize her, but you? Diwu Zhangzi's face flushed red and he was somewhat embarrassed. This isn't entirely my fault. Who would have thought that this lass would actually change her appearance? Everything was fine, how did it end up like this? Diwu Zhangzi's question was also what the other two wanted to know. Lan Xiao pondered seriously for a moment. Could it be that the little girl dislikes her appearance for not being beautiful enough? Was that why he changed his face? Dugu Mabao looked at him as if he was an idiot. Damn pervert, do you think everyone is like you? You can change your face as you wish, but can this girl do the same? Besides, who in this world would think that her previous face wasn't beautiful enough? Lan Xiao didn't mind being called a damn pervert. Instead, he deeply agreed with the latter sentence. That's true. If it weren't for the fact that he doted on this girl, he would have already taken her face. That was really a rare beauty in this world. He raised his eyebrows slightly, and there was some admiration in his eyes. However, her current appearance is still a little young and inexperienced. When she grows up, she won't lose to the past at all. Speaking of which, why is she tormenting herself like this? Dugu Mabao's face darkened. Not only did she change her face, but her body has also changed. These words made the other two's faces change slightly. To them, changing one's appearance was nothing much. However, it was different after changing her body. One must know that to a cultivator, the physical body was extremely important. Dantian, core of essence, Yuan meridian. Once the physical body was abandoned, all these would be abandoned too. Moreover, that girl had the Tianjing Yuan meridian. The three of them fell into a short silence. Previously, they relied on their perception of the girl's soul. However, they didn't expect that other than this soul, the rest of the girl's body had been replaced. What exactly was going on? Do you think that the girl hasn't come for these few years? Could it be that she didn't forget, but something happened? Diwu Zhangzi said slowly. They had never thought of this possibility before. The girl was smart and cunning, and she was extremely talented and strong. Back then she could still exchange a few blows with them. How could something have happened? From the bottom of their hearts, they didn't want to believe this guess. However, if this was true, what exactly happened to cause her to change her body and start all over again? Diwu Zhangzi said, let's wait first. It seems that the girl is now at odds with that Tutian baby. It won't be too late to ask her when she comes out. Dugu Mabao clenched his fists and his body was filled with killing intent. Lan Zhao's eyebrows twitched. He was afraid that he would make a scene now and start a massacre. He quickly said, hey Big Bao. Calm down. The girl hasn't come out yet. We'll talk about everything after we find out. What's the use of getting angry now? Dugu Mabao gritted his teeth and said word by word, where the hell did that Rong Xiu kid go? His Highness the Holy Sun, who was reading files at his desk, suddenly sneezed. He put down the brush in his hand, rubbed his eyebrows and chuckled. Seems like someone is thinking about me. He paused for a moment and finished reading all the files in front of him. Then he got up and walked to the window. A snow-white figure suddenly flew down from the sky at high speed. The soldiers who were standing guard outside the hall all looked up in surprise. How long had it been? Why did His Highness's devil beast look like it had become stronger again? Shue swept across the empty space in front of the hall, and a layer of frost actually condensed on the ground. Its figure had already entered the hall and disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. This time Shue still chose to break the window and enter. Fortunately, the hall was spacious enough, and the items used were all top-notch, so there was no need to worry about them being damaged. Shue leaped into the room. Rong Xiu looked at it and his thin lips curved up. You sure know how to pick the right time. Shue had already guessed what its master wanted it to do. It wagged its tail happily and looked at Rong Xiu with its icy blue eyes. After waiting for a while, Rong Xiu's smile deepened. You can go first. I planned to bring Shue along later, but it seems like I can't wait anymore. Shue was very excited and ran out. Brr. Its roar shook the sky. It wasn't hard to tell how happy it was. Rong Xiu looked at its rapidly disappearing figure and raised his eyebrows. Even he felt a headache from the anger of those few people. Let Shue go first. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 771. At this moment, Shue had no idea that it had been sold by its master. It was overjoyed as it tore through space and plunged into it. It headed straight for Dahuang Swamp. After a while, Rong Xiu retracted his gaze. After pondering for a moment, he pushed the door open and walked out. Greetings, Your Highness. Seeing him come out, the soldiers outside the door immediately bowed respectfully. "You may rise." Rong Xiu's expression had returned to calmness, and no one could tell that he was angry. 36 Respected Elder Ming hasn't returned yet? Not yet, Your Highness. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes slightly. Calculating the time, he had been gone for quite some time. According to 36 Respected Elder Ming's temper, he shouldn't have wasted so much time with the Ming division. He didn't intend to get involved in this. After all, the Ming division was too difficult to deal with. But now he had to rush to Dahuang Swamp as soon as possible. Then he had to find 36 Respected Elder Ming to discuss this matter. He thought for a moment, then walked forward. In the dim space, the surroundings were silent. However, Chu Liwei felt as if someone was whispering in her ear. Although she couldn't hear it clearly, it was still there. Only after a long time had passed did it gradually quiet down. She glanced at Taizu without batting an eyelid, but didn't see any abnormality in his expression. It seemed that Taizu really didn't hear anything. Strange, Chu Liwei lowered her eyes and thought to herself. Could it be that someone deliberately let me hear these voices? But the other party doesn't seem to have any ill intentions, and even, there's some undisguised joy in doting. It's as if they were very familiar with each other. Chu Liwei thought for a while but still came up with nothing. In the end, she closed her eyes, put away her thoughts, and continued to devour the two Tian babies' power. Bang! A crisp and soft sound was heard. Another fragment fell from the heaven-wrecking holy seed. Then it flew silently toward Chu Liwei and melted into the water screen, turning into a water droplet and entering her body. Seeing this scene, the three of them were all stunned. Even the furious Dugu Mabao was stunned. He stopped scolding Rong Xiu halfway. What is this girl doing? That layer of crystal was formed after the two Tian babies swallowed thousands of years of power. It was specially used to protect itself before it matured. She actually swallowed it just like that? Lan Xiao clicked his tongue. I didn't expect that the lass would become younger, and her ability would also increase. See, I told you that you can't just dig it out and give it to her, right? Now the little girl can deal with it herself. Such top-notch existences usually had spirituality. It wasn't impossible to force it to submit, but if it carried unwillingness and anger, there would eventually be hidden dangers. Only by completely suppressing it and making it submit to him could it truly be considered his own. In that case, he wouldn't have to worry about using it in the future. Although the little girl was only gnawing on small pieces, it was still extremely outstanding. As long as there was enough time, she would definitely be able to rely on her own ability to take down the two Tian baby. Diwu Zhangzhe was secretly amazed. What is that water curtain? Can you guys see it? The lass is only a stage 5 warrior now, but with that water curtain she can actually go against the two Tian baby and even have the upper hand. Lan Xiao looked over, shook his head and said very honestly, I can't see it. Dugu Mabao held back for a long time before saying unwillingly, I can't see it. The other two looked at him in surprise. Debao, you've been roaming the continent for many years and have seen more rare treasures than the two of us combined. There's actually something that you can't see the origin of? He had a fiery temper and was proud and stubborn. It wasn't easy for him to admit it. Dugu Mabao waved his hand in annoyance. It's so far away and there's the two Tian babies' divine realm blocking it. What can you see? When the lass finishes dealing with the two Tian baby, can't she just say it herself? No matter what, it's not an ordinary item. Xuanhuan and the rest finally returned to Xiling after passing through several teleportation portals. The Pingliang Square was as noisy as usual. Suddenly, the largest teleportation portal in the middle started rotating slowly. Everyone turned to look at him, their faces filled with shock. Look, the teleportation portal is actually moving. Could it be that the third princess and the rest are coming back? It can't be, right? Didn't they just leave not long ago? Plus the time spent on the journey back and forth. They can't be coming back right after reaching Dahuang Swamp, right? But that teleportation portal is exclusively for them. Ever since they left, it hasn't been moved. Could it be that someone dares to use it without permission? Isn't that someone tired of living? While everyone was discussing, the surrounding black guards had already reacted quickly. The people on Pingliang Square were all chased down. The black guards surrounded the area, and the transportation array in the middle was also surrounded in a circle. The cold and stern black cavalry was ready for battle. It was as if they were welcoming a big shot. Seeing this scene, what else could the crowd not understand? To be able to make the black cavalry like this, the third princess and the rest must be back. In the face of such a serious aura, many people were silent. However, their eyes were still fixed on the center. Obviously, everyone wanted to see the results of the third princess leading the army to Dahuang Swamp to help His Majesty get the medicine. Soon, several figures appeared on the teleportation portal. Who else could it be but the third princess xuanhuan? Standing beside her was jianghu. The surrounding black cavalry immediately knelt down to welcome her. Welcome back, third princess. The onlookers naturally had to bow as well. In an instant, a large number of people knelt down in all directions. Rise, xuanhuan said. Everyone stood up one after another. However, when they saw xuanhuan's appearance clearly, many people were surprised. xuanhuan's face was covered with a veil? Moreover, she was wearing a cloak with the hood on her head, almost covering half of her face. In such a dress, everyone could only see a pair of eyes and the rest was tightly covered. Although it was winter at this time because it was almost spring, it was not that cold. It was really a little strange for xuanhuan to be dressed like this. However, ordinary people were naturally not qualified to ask these questions. A young man stepped forward. He seemed to be the general of the Black Cavalry. The last General Lu Shan greets the third princess. Eldest young master. Deputy General. xuanhuan did not want to stay here any longer, so she directly said, all the Black Cavalry soldiers and disciples of various sects have worked very hard on this trip. Go back and rest. In addition, I have something important to discuss with the court officials. Pass down the order. All the major sect leaders and aristocratic family heads are to go to the palace immediately. Although Lu Shan was confused, he immediately said, yes. Digression. In the morning, the editor suddenly said that the names of the articles could not be punctuated, so everyone began to change the names. It was a chaotic morning. The meeting continued at 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from AI Network. After Lu San respectfully sent off xuanhuan and the others, he looked at Mu Qinghe in confusion. He was a little anxious. Deputy General, why didn't you inform us that you were coming back this time? This welcome is too hasty. Mu Qinghe shook her head. I've kept this matter in mind, so I didn't have time to inform you. It's fine. Immediately send people to bring the injured Black Cavalry back to recuperate. In addition, Tian Zhuang and the others will report the casualties to you. I'll leave them to you to deal with the aftermath. Lu San's heart sank when he heard this. The last general understands. He looked up and quickly scanned the surroundings. He realized that the number of casualties might be much higher than he had expected. His mood became heavier. Dahuang Swamp was indeed full of danger, but ever since Mu Qinghe led the troops to quell the rebellion a few years ago, it had actually become much better. Logically speaking, such a situation shouldn't have happened. However, he didn't dare to ask too much and could only follow Mu Qinghe's instructions. As for the disciples of the other sects, the situation wasn't any better. They were different from the Black Cavalry. The Black Cavalry was an army, and their duty was to obey. However, the relationship between the various sects and the Tianling royal family wasn't completely submissive. They respected the Tianling royal family, and at the same time the Tianling royal family also respected them. Those who could enter these sects were undoubtedly geniuses. Moreover, those who were selected to go to Dahuang Swamp this time were 1 in 100 and were extremely outstanding. Now that they were dead and injured, it was a huge loss to the various sections. Why are there only 3 people from the Purple Shao Sword sect? Didn't they go with 10 people when they went? They're the ones who suffered the most losses, right? The other sects also suffered casualties, but none of them are like them, I think. Wait, where are the people from the Chongshu Pavilion? Why haven't they appeared yet? As soon as this was said, everyone fell silent for a moment. Countless gazes quickly scanned the scene, but they didn't see anyone from the Chongshu Pavilion. Only 3 people went to the Chongshu Pavilion. In addition, Chu Luiyue and Chang Wanzhou had recently become famous, so they were especially eye-catching. But now, not a single one of them had appeared. Could it be that the people from the Chongshu Pavilion are all? Someone in the crowd softly said half a sentence. He didn't say the rest, but everyone knew what he meant. Everyone's expression became complicated and subtle, and their eyes were all different. It wasn't easy for the Chongshu Pavilion to produce 2 top geniuses. Were they really going to die? Without Chu Luiyue and Chang Wanzhou, the Chongshu Pavilion situation would definitely become more difficult in the future. Spring Breeze Restaurant. In the private room, Shui Lu and Jian Fengqi were sitting facing each other by the window. Shui Lu hugged the pipa but didn't play it. She only looked at Jian Fengqi opposite her and asked, "So, everything went smoothly? Of course, there won't be any problems with me taking action personally." Jian Fengqi leaned lazily against the back of the chair, his sword-like eyebrows slightly raised with undisguised arrogance. Shui Lu sneered. "Those two aren't in West Hill, of course it's more convenient for you to do things." Jian Fengqi didn't deny it either. When his father urged him to go to Da Huang Swamp, he refused to go no matter what and insisted on staying in West Hill. Wasn't that all for this? Anyway, things are progressing well now. Next we just need to— Suddenly there was a commotion on the street outside the window. Jian Fengqi immediately fell silent. Shui Lu opened the window and looked down. A trace of shock flashed across her face. The Black Cavalry? Jian Fengqi sensed that something was wrong, so he went over to take a look. Then he frowned. What? Xuanhuan is back. On the wide street, the Black Cavalry was on alert on both sides. A few figures were coming from the middle. The person in front was wearing a cloak and a veil, but Jian Fengqi recognized her at first glance. She was Xuanhuan. And beside her was jianghu. There were also a few servants following behind the two of them, all of them maintaining a distance that was neither too close nor too far. Shouldn't they be back in a month or so? Why would they? Shui Lu asked in confusion. Jian Fengqi narrowed his eyes and said, "She's back after finding medicine for His Majesty. It should be a big celebration. Why is she so timid?" With that he flicked his finger. "I'd like to see what she's feeling so guilty about, hiding it so well." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 773. Wait. As soon as Jian Fengqi moved, Shui Lu grabbed his wrist before his force could fly out. Because of this distraction, he was unable to launch his attack. Jian Fengqi glanced at her with dissatisfaction. "Little Lu, why are you stopping me? Maybe there's a shocking secret hidden under that veil." He knew Xuanhuan too well. Xuanhuan had always valued her appearance very much. She also liked to dress herself up perfectly to show off to the world and win praise. She was very particular about her makeup and hair accessories at all times. She didn't allow any mistakes to be made. Today she was wearing a veil for the first time. She even wore a hood to cover herself up tightly. It would be strange if there wasn't something fishy going on. She rushed back from Da Huang Swamp in such a hurry without any news beforehand. It was obvious that she had made a sudden decision. Under such circumstances, her actions were even more intriguing. Shui Lu glared at him and flung his wrist away. "If I didn't stop you, did you really intend to make things difficult for her in public? Are all those Black Cavalry soldiers useless? If you make a move 1 second ago, they might come knocking on your door the next second." Jian Fengqi coughed, retreated, and smiled eagerly in a fawning manner. "I was just joking. Little Lu, don't be angry. There's no need to be angry over someone like her, right?" Shui Lu also understood that Jian Fengqi knew the severity of the matter, so she didn't continue to say anything. She turned around and saw that Xuanhuan and the rest had already left quickly. She was a little suspicious. Why do they look like they're in a hurry? Are they in a hurry to return to the palace? Jian Fengqi rubbed his chin. "I knew that there must be a shameful secret hidden under that veil. The palace is her territory. Of course she's in a hurry to return. Fortunately, I've already done what I need to do." If Xuanhuan had returned earlier, he might have been in trouble. Thinking of this, Shui Lu heaved a sigh of relief. "You've handled this matter well." Jian Fengqi had a bright smile on his face, and he was carefree and unrestrained. "Little Lu has always been reluctant to praise me. Today is a rare occasion." Shui Lu couldn't be bothered with him and changed the topic. "Since they're back, the rest of the troops should be back too, right?" Jian Fengqi's eyes flickered. This meant that Mu Hongyu and Chu Luiyue should be behind them. He glanced outside a few more times, only to see that after Xuanhuan and the rest left, no one followed them. Just when the two of them were puzzled, a voice came from outside the window. "Haven't you heard?" 2. Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged and focused on her cultivation. Her aura continued to grow stronger. B. Diwu Zhangzi finally spoke. "We don't know how long it'll take for the girl to come out." Lan Xiao and Dugu Mabao realized this too. Lan Xiao was a little worried. "But if we don't see the girl today, we'll have to wait another month. The night of the Crimson Moon only happened once a month." Dugu Mabao turned and left. "So be it. We've waited for a few years. Why should we be afraid of a month?" The other two looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. He had always been the one who stuck to the girl the most. Now he was willing to be the first to leave? Diwu Xianxia followed and asked. You're really not going to wait any longer? Dugu Mabao said coldly. If we wait any longer, will she see us? Diwu Xianxia was speechless. The girl was trapped in there. Of course she couldn't see them. She's cultivating. Let her cultivate in peace. As for meeting, she's already here. What difference does it make if we meet earlier or later? Based on her current strength, she would definitely need a month to completely devour the two Tian baby. What's the hurry? Big Bao is right. Lan Xiao nodded in agreement and followed. Staying up late is bad for the skin. I have to go back and catch up on sleep. The remaining two quieted down. A moment later. You're a living dead. Why do you need to catch up on sleep? Lan Xiao, I'll ask you again seriously. Are you sick? Lan Xiao felt sorry for himself and was very resentful. He secretly thought that these two didn't know how to appreciate his beauty. What do you know? The girl likes beautiful people. So I can understand. You two, one young and one old. No matter how hard you work, you can't compare to me. What's there to compete for? Diwu Xianxia reminded objectively. Have you forgotten Rongxiu? You've changed so many faces, but none of them can compare to him. The beautiful fantasy in Lan Zhao's head was instantly shattered. He gritted his teeth and cursed. Damn it. Dugu Mabao suddenly sneered. Speak of the devil. Just as he was thinking about it, it came. His figure flashed and he quickly rushed up. It was the last moment before dawn, and the forest was dark. The rustling wind blew past and quickly disappeared. Not long later, Red Moon Desert. Suddenly, a black spatial crack appeared in the void. Immediately, a snow-white figure jumped out from it. Xuanhuan shook its body and a lot of frost fell. Under the red moonlight in the night sky, it reflected a faint light. It looked around, sniffed, and began to search for Chu Luiyue. It seemed to be Russell. At this moment, a strange sound suddenly came from below. Xuanhuan looked down. It saw that there seemed to be something moving under the undulating sand dunes. It blinked, then as if it suddenly thought of something, it looked up. A red moon was hanging high in the black night sky. A hint of fear flashed across Xuanhuan's eyes. Without a second thought, it turned around and ran. What a coincidence. But before it could run out, it heard a soft and gentle voice. Little snowflake, long time no see. Why are you running? Xuanhuan didn't even turn its head, and its claws dug even harder. However, not only did it not run forward, but its body kept moving backward, and it even fell to the ground. When it was pressed on the cold sand, Xuanhuan finally realized that it was still too inexperienced. It made a prompt decision, and it was very decisive. It lay down obediently. It even wagged its tail to express its joy. Little snowflake has become smarter after not seeing you for a few years. The voice came closer, as if the person was right beside its ear. Xuanhuan's body stiffened, and it didn't dare to move. It whimpered softly, and its pair of ice-blue eyes were watery, looking very docile and cute. A wise man submits to circumstances. A moment later, a baby-like voice sounded coldly. Where's your master? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 774. Where's your master? Xuanhuan was stunned for a moment when she heard this, but she quickly reacted. His master's calm and indifferent eyes immediately appeared in his mind. Xuanhuan slowly widened its eyes. No wonder. No wonder master didn't agree to it when it wanted to come, but he suddenly allowed it. It naively thought that it was because it had been cultivating diligently recently and increased its strength. It didn't expect. It had been betrayed by its master. Master must have known that it was the night of the crimson moon, so he deliberately let it come. And from the looks of it, they weren't in a good mood now. Was this the reason why master let it come first? Xuanhuan was heartbroken and regretful. It thought to itself that it was foolish to form a contract with him back then. So what if it was a divine beast? It was still betrayed, wasn't it? Xuanhuan lowered its head dejectedly, looking like it had nothing to live for. Seeing its expression, Dugu Mabao understood what was going on. It couldn't help but sneer. He's really straightforward. He sent you here and let you take the blame? Lan Xiao touched his face and his voice became gentler. What's the use of being too good-looking? He has a bad heart. That girl must be blind to like him. Dugu Mabao was silent for a moment, and its voice became colder. Who are you calling blind? Lan Xiao. What did I say? I didn't say anything. Diwu little Shui is quite pitiful. It has already taken the blame a few times. Be gentler this time. Diwu Xianxia said faintly. Do you think it's my turn to do anything? Could they stop Dugu Mabao from doing anything he wanted? Shui thought that it had a chance of survival when it heard Lan Xiao pleading for it, but Diwu Xiangxia's words made it lose all hope. It lowered its head pitifully, and its head was pressed against its paws. It was very uneasy. After a moment, Dugu Mabao said, Come here. Mystic Forest. The long night passed. A layer of bright light gradually lit up the sky, plating the clouds with a layer of gold. This added a bit of warmth to the originally lonely and desolate Mystic Forest. However, the few people in the forest didn't feel better, because the mother tree in front of them still did not move. As for Chu Luiyue, he was nowhere to be found. He had no intention of coming out. Even Qini didn't know how long he had to wait. At this moment they were completely unaware of what had happened in the Mirror Lake and the Red Moon Desert. The West Hill. After the Black Cavalry escorted xuanhuan, Jiang Yuqing, and the others away, someone said something that immediately caused the whole street to boil. Are you serious? There were a total of 3 disciples from the Chongshu Pavilion, including Chu Luiyue and Chang Wanzhou. Logically speaking, they should have no problem protecting themselves. How could they all die? Where did you hear this news from? Of course it's real. When the third princess and the others came back, I was at Pingliang Plaza. The Black Cavalry and the sect disciples had all returned. Only the Chongshu Pavilion was empty. If he's not dead, then what is? I saw it too. They really didn't come back. That's impossible. So many people who were weaker than them came back alive. Who can be sure about such things? About 300 to 400 people from the Black Cavalry died. The 3 disciples from the Chongshu Pavilion probably acted together and were completely annihilated. This time the Chongshu Pavilion really suffered a huge loss. That's right. There was just a slight improvement, and now Chu Luiyue and Chang Wanzhou are gone. What a pity. Just as the crowd was discussing fervently, a figure suddenly jumped down from upstairs and directly jumped in front of the few people who were talking. He then grabbed the collar of the man who spoke first. What did you just say? The man who spoke was caught off guard and was easily grabbed by the person. His collar was tightly gripped and he almost couldn't breathe. Who are you? He was enraged and instinctively wanted to curse out loud. However, when he took a closer look, he got a shock. Young Master Jian? Many people in Xiling City recognized Jian Fengqi's face. Young Master Jian, let's talk nicely. Jian Fengqi stared at him and asked word by word, I'm asking you, who did you say died? The man was panicking. He was afraid that Jian Fengqi would twist his neck and break his neck. He hurriedly said, It's those people from the Chongshu Pavilion? I'm not sure. Young Master Jian, please spare my life. The people from the major sects have already gone back. If you want to know, you can ask them. Jian Fengqi pushed him away, went on his toes, and swiftly headed for Pingliang Square. According to the time, there should still be many people who hadn't gone too far from Pingliang Square. The man who was pushed away struggled to get up and looked in the direction Jian Fengqi left, still in shock. The crowd around them also quieted down because of this. Someone couldn't help but murmur, why does the young master of Dragon Teeth Mountain care so much about what happened at the Chongshu Pavilion? I heard that Dragon Teeth Mountain and Chongshu Pavilion have a good relationship. I wonder how the people of Chongshu Pavilion will react when they hear this news. Upstairs, Shui Lu looked out of the window. Jian Fengqi's figure quickly disappeared from her sight. Her willowy eyebrows furrowed slightly. This time, I'm afraid things are going to get out of hand. Jian Fengqi moved quickly and soon bumped into Zhu Hong and the others who were on their way back. At a glance, they were all injured and their auras were extremely weak. Jian Fengqi's heart skipped a beat. Zhu Hong. Zhu Hong looked up. Young master. Jian Fengqi quickly went to them and asked anxiously, what's going on at the Chongshu Pavilion? Digression. The title of the book should be changed in the next 2 days. Don't take it off the shelves just because it's unfamiliar to you. You must keep me here. Tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 775. Seeing how anxious he was, Zhu Hong hurriedly said, Young master, don't worry. It's a long story about the people from the Chongshu Pavilion. Seeing Zhu Hong's reaction, Jian Fengqi felt a little relieved. Things might be different from what those people were saying. Zhu Hong took a deep breath. Young master, let's go back first. It's not convenient here. On the streets, anything they said could be overheard by someone with ulterior motives. Although Jian Fengqi was anxious, he could only suppress it. Then he glanced at the few people and frowned slightly. Where's Hongyu? Zhu Hong pursed his lips. She's with the people from the Chongshu pavilion. Jian Fengqi's heart sank. Young master, don't worry. They're fine now. Zhu Hong saw that his expression was not right and quickly added. Jian Fengqi was even more confused. Chu Luiyue, Mu Hongyu and the others did not come back with the main group, but Zhu Hong said that they were fine. What in the world had happened? Countless questions surfaced in his mind, but Jian Fengqi suppressed them and looked at them again. These people were all injured to varying degrees. Zhu Hong was still fine, but the others could barely stand. Let's go back to Dragon Teeth Mountain first. Dragon Teeth Mountain. As soon as the seriously injured people returned, they were immediately sent for treatment and recuperation. Zhu Hong was the only one left. He was in good health and was the leader, so he naturally had to stay. After they returned to the mountain, Jianxia heard the news and immediately rushed over. Zhu Hong explained the ins and outs of the matter to Jianxia and Jian Fengqi in detail. This time, it's all thanks to Miss Chu's help that we could come back safely. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. After that, the room fell into silence. The father and son's expressions were very solemn and serious. After a while, Jianxia said, "So now Chu Luiyue is missing, and the rest of the people are still in the mystic forest looking for her whereabouts?" Zhu Hong nodded. "Originally we also wanted to stay and help, but considering that our people were all injured, even if we stayed we might not be able to help much. We might even become a burden to everyone, so in the end we chose to come back with the main group." Jianxia heaved a long sigh. "That's right. It's only right that you do this. In a place like the Great Desolate Swamp, unless one was a top-notch expert, anyone could become trouble for others. Not to mention the injured ones." Jian Fengqi suddenly said, "Are you saying that Snapper and Chu Luiyue have been working together since the beginning?" "Yes." At that time, the few of them had taken the lead and headed into the depths of the forest, just in time to avoid that accident. Because of that, none of them were injured when we met again. Jian Fengqi had mixed feelings. Mu Hongyu and Chu Luiyue were very close, so it was normal for them to work together. I just don't know what the current situation is like. Master, young master, don't worry. With Qin Yi and Lei Laosi around, nothing should happen to Snapper and the rest. Zhu Hong was actually a little worried, but he could only place his hopes on Qin Yi and the rest now. As for Chu Luiyue, he didn't dare to mention it again. The possibility of her surviving was simply too small. Jianxia suddenly asked, "The Qin Yi and Lei Laosi you're talking about? Who exactly are they? Have they really been staying in the mystic forest to protect that legendary fiend?" Zhu Hong explained, "The two of them are very strong. Even in the entire Tianling dynasty, they're definitely top-notch experts, but we don't know the two of them. However, they did seem to have stayed in the mystic forest for a very long time. As for the one they were protecting, to be precise, it was a 9-colored heavenly pheasant. After that, it successfully broke through and finally became a red-tailed phoenix." 9-colored heavenly pheasant. The father and son both exclaimed in shock. Isn't that the same as the fiend that the princess had a contract with? If it were any other 9th-grade fiend, they definitely wouldn't have such a huge reaction. However, it just had to be a 9-colored heavenly pheasant. For a moment, the few of them didn't speak. After a long while, Jian Fengqi muttered softly, "What a coincidence. It's actually Lu Yu who contracted that 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Oh no, it's the red-tailed phoenix." Chu Luiyue originally looked similar to the princess, and now that she contracted this fiend, it made one's imagination run wild. It's a pity that she's nowhere to be found now, and I don't know if I can still find her. If she comes back in the end, she definitely won't be able to avoid xuanhuan making things difficult for her. Thinking about xuanhuan, Jian Fengqi suddenly felt energized. "Alright, house, the third princess?" Zhu Hong was dazed for a moment as if he didn't quite understand what Jian Fengqi was asking. Jian Fengqi rephrased his question. "Is there something wrong with her body or her face?" Zhu Hong shook his head. "I don't know. Back then, the ones standing near xuanhuan were Jiang Yuqing, Mu Qinghe, and the rest. In addition, she quickly covered herself up tightly afterward, so even fewer people saw that her face was injured. Zhu Hong and the rest's attention was on Chu Luiyue, Mu Hongyu, and the rest, so they naturally didn't know anything about this. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door. "Master, the third princess has summoned all the people from the various sects and families to the palace to discuss important matters. The palace servants are already waiting outside." Xianxia stood up. Zhuhong, you should go back and recuperate first. As for Hongyu and the rest, you don't have to worry too much. She's my disciple. If anything happens to her, I'll still be there as her master. Hearing him say this, Zhuhong instantly heaved a sigh of relief. It seems like the master has made preparations. I'll go to the palace to take a look first. Fengqi, go back and make a trip to the Chongshu Pavilion and tell them to relax first. I wonder how the rumors outside have spread now. Jian Fengqi actually wanted to go to the palace very much, but after hearing this he changed his mind. I know. Don't worry. Xianxia turned and left. Not long after, Jian Fengqi set off for the Chongshu Pavilion. Just as Xianxia said, all kinds of news had spread throughout the entire Xiling city in a short period of time. The sudden return of xuanhuan and the rest shocked everyone. In addition, the series of strange reactions they had after returning caused many speculations. The news that none of the Chongshu Pavilion disciples returned spread to countless people's ears as if it had grown wings. Everyone had different reactions, both openly and secretly. When Jian Fengqi rushed to the Chongshu Pavilion, Yu Qisong had already followed the palace servants to the palace. Tianling Palace. Xuanhuan returned to Huayang Palace and chased everyone out. She took off her cloak, sat in front of the bronze mirror, and carefully took off her veil. A face covered in scars and badly mutilated appeared in the bronze mirror. Xuanhuan stared at the face in the mirror as blood surged between her teeth. Thinking of how she still had to meet those people later, she suppressed the anger in her heart and took out a box of cream from the cabinet beside her. She carefully dipped it in and applied it to her face. Just as the cream touched her face, she instantly felt a burning pain. She finally couldn't help but cry out in pain. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from LoveNet. Chapter 776. Hearing her scream, Chani, who was waiting outside, was startled and immediately asked, "What happened?" She immediately asked, "Your Highness, what's wrong? You're not allowed to come in." Xuanhuan immediately shouted. "Yes." Chani quickly replied with a slight frown. When Her Highness returned, she hid herself very well. Chani had already vaguely guessed something. Now, it seemed like she was most likely right. How did she end up like this after going to Dahuang Swamp? Chani looked up at the palace servants standing in the courtyard with a cold gaze. When everyone heard Xuanhuan scream, they knew something was wrong. Sensing Chanyi's dangerous gaze, they lowered their eyes and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. "All of you may leave." "Yes." Hearing this, everyone hurriedly left as if they had been pardoned. After they left, Chani looked at the tightly shut door again. The intense burning sensation caused Xuanhuan's mind to go blank. She hurriedly looked at the bronze mirror, only to see that the wound on her face, which she had just applied the cream on, was faintly black. It was as if she had been scalded. The curled skin and flesh looked as if it had been burned by flames. It was slightly curled and slightly charred. Even though it was only a small patch, it was very obvious. So the pain just now was because I was really burned. Xuanhuan's face was filled with shock. What's going on? The cream was clearly a superior medicine for treating scars. How did it end up like this? She hurriedly looked at the box in her hand. That's right. This is the cream. It wasn't that she hadn't used it before. Occasionally, when she bumped into something and got a scar, she would recover quickly with this. But now, Xuanhuan threw the cream to the side and leaned closer to the bronze mirror. Looking at the wound on her face, she was filled with worry. In order to retrieve the dancing lotus as soon as possible, she had sent people to gather the people from the various sects and aristocratic families the moment she returned. She wanted to use the cream to heal the wound on her face slightly so that she could be seen. However, she didn't expect that not only did it not heal, but it also ended up like this. Xuanhuan was very scared. Her body trembled slightly and her lips were pale. If she really couldn't recover her looks, she didn't dare to use the cream anymore, but what else could she use? Xuanhuan sat in front of the bronze mirror for a long time, conflicted and in pain. This continued until Chani knocked on the door again. "Your Highness, all the sect leaders and patriarchs are about to reach Minghua Palace. Do you want me to help you with your grooming?" Xuanhuan suddenly came back to her senses. Only then did she realize that she had not done anything for such a long time. Now that she was in such a sorry state, if others were to see her, they would definitely mock her. She gritted her teeth. "That's not necessary. Bengong will go to the hot springs." There was hot spring water behind Huayang Palace. Yes. Chani didn't dare to ask any more questions and respectfully agreed. Xuanhuan walked to the back alone, opened the side door and entered the hot spring area. Jiang Yuqing returned to the palace with Xuanhuan. However, Xuanhuan wasn't willing to face anyone with that face. Jiang Yuqing was also very tactful. After saying a few words he left Huayang Palace. After that he went straight to Qingfeng Palace. After leaving for so long, what he cared about the most was Her Majesty's current situation. When he arrived at Qingfeng Palace the security was still tight. Seeing him arrive, the palace servants bowed in unison. Greetings, Prince Consort. The wedding date of Jiang Yuqing and Xuanhuan had been set. That was what the palace called it. Jiang Yuqing nodded and asked as he walked in. As he walked in he asked, "Has Her Majesty shown any signs of waking up during this period of time?" The palace servants shook their heads. This was originally within Jiang Yuqing's expectations, but he was still somewhat disappointed when he heard it. Everything was done cautiously and cautiously. Even if he had poisoned her too much back then, she should have woken up after such a long period of recuperation. However, there was no change in Her Majesty. This made him even more irritable. Just as Jiang Yuqing was about to go in and take a look in person, the palace servants outside reported that everyone had arrived one after another and asked him to go over. In desperation, Jiang Yuqing could only withdraw his hand that was about to push the door open. After telling everyone to take good care of Her Majesty, he turned around and left. Qingfeng Palace regained its peace again. In the room, Shangguanyu, who had been in a coma for a long time, moved his fingers gently. Minghua Palace. The leaders of several major sects gathered here again. In addition, the masters of the aristocratic families in Xiling City were basically all here. Everyone was divided into two sides, greeting each other politely, but they all had their own thoughts in their hearts. Such a battle formation could not be said to be small. Xuanhuan and Jiang Yuqing had not appeared. In the main hall, discussions gradually arose. Her Highness the Third Princess suddenly brought people back from the Dahuang Swamp and gathered so many people. It seems that something really happened. I heard that there were heavy casualties in this trip to the Dahuang Swamp. Nearly 400 people of the Black Cavalry alone died. That's not all. The disciples of all the major sects also suffered injuries. Didn't you see how awful Xuanhuan of the Purple Shao Sword sect looked? 10 of them went this time and only 3 came back alive. This should be the most miserable family, right? Although everyone lowered their voices, everyone present was basically a top-notch powerhouse. How could they not hear it? Xuanhuan had indeed heard the news long ago. Until now he had not calmed down. He sat in his seat with a livid expression. His fists were clenched tightly, and the veins on the back of his hands were popping out. However, he forced himself to endure it. Because those who could come here had high statuses. Unless he had no choice, he was also unwilling to offend anyone. Right at this moment the announcement sounded again. The pavilion master of the Chongshu Pavilion has arrived. The hall instantly quieted down. Everyone looked over at the same time with different expressions on their faces. They were the most well-informed people in Xiling City and naturally knew that none of the 3 disciples of the Chongshu Pavilion had returned. This basically meant that they all died in the Dahuang Swamp. Not long ago, the Chongshu Pavilion was still in the limelight and held on to the name of the 4 major sections. Everyone thought that by relying on Chu Luiyue and Chang Wanzhou, the Chongshu Pavilion's situation would gradually improve. They did not expect that all of them would be gone after just one trip to the Dahuang Swamp. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to the Chongshu Pavilion. However, out of everyone's expectations, Yu Qisong's expression was very calm, as if he did not feel any pain from losing his disciples. Under everyone's gazes, Wei Qisong walked straight in. After a simple greeting, he sat down in his seat. Seeing him so calm and composed, everyone did not know how to react for a moment. Could it be that he still doesn't know what happened? Xuanhuan was in a bad mood and couldn't help but speak up in a strange tone. Pavilion Master Wei Qi, I heard that the 3 disciples of your pavilion who went to the Dahuang Swamp did not return? You have to restrain your grief. The moment he finished speaking, the entire atmosphere seemed to have frozen. Yu Qisong looked up and glanced at Xuanhuan calmly and coldly. What? Do you want to cry at the grave? Digression. Here is a February who has insomnia and is about to faint from hunger. Writing words is really an individual effort. 6 o'clock. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 777. This sentence nearly made Xuanhuan choke to death. His face turned pale, then green, and then red. His expression changed very excitedly. He suddenly stood up and said angrily, "What did you say?" He was originally very frustrated and depressed. How could he control himself after hearing this sentence? It was as if he was ignited by fire. He exploded. However, Yuchi Song's expression was indifferent. Everyone present should have heard what I said clearly. Why are you the only one who didn't hear it clearly? Is there something wrong with your ears? It seems like your ears are just like your mouth. They're just decorations. It's fine if you don't want them. Yuchi Song scolded Xuanhuan until he was black and blue all over with just a few words. Everyone was dumbfounded. Yuchi Song had always been a person of virtue and prestige. His speech and actions had always been very low-key. And ever since Chongshu Pavilion suffered consecutive blows more than a year ago, it was needless to say, the entire Chongshu Pavilion seemed to have become transparent. Precisely because of this, many people gradually stopped taking Chongshu Pavilion seriously. They originally thought that this time, the deaths of Chu Luiyue and the other two would be a huge blow to Yuchi Song and the others. Some even suspected that he wouldn't come to the palace at all. They didn't expect that not only did he come, but he was also so domineering. How many people in the entire Shilling City dared to speak to Xuanhuan like this? Many people exchanged glances and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Could it be that he suffered too much of a shock? Yuchi Song sat in his seat and allowed countless gazes to size him up. He remained as still as a mountain. Would he not know if his own disciple was dead or alive? Those 3 children just didn't come back with xuanhuan and the others, but he knew clearly that they were still fine. However, he didn't intend to publicize this news now. On the way here, he knew that someone would definitely use this to create trouble for their Chongshu Pavilion. If it was anything else, he would just turn a blind eye and be too lazy to fuss over it. However, Xuanhuan was talking about those 3 children and even cursed them to die. How could he tolerate it? Xuanhuan was dumbfounded. In his memory, Yuchi Song had never been so rude to anyone. He was so angry that he laughed and sneered. Pavilion Master Wei Qi, we're all part of the 4 great sects. I'm merely expressing my concern. Aren't your words a little too much? Yuchi Song glanced at him as if he was watching a joke. I heard that 7 outstanding disciples of the Purple Shao Sword sect died this time. I didn't expect that sect leader Song would still be in the mood to care about our Chongshu Pavilion. Xuanhuan's heart immediately choked up and he couldn't speak. They had indeed lost 7 disciples. Among the remaining 3, other than his own son, Song Qingyan, who was in relatively good condition, the other 2 were severely injured. It was very likely that it would affect their future cultivation. It could be said that they were completely wiped out. One had to know that the people sent to the Great Desolate Swamp this time were all the most outstanding disciples of their Purple Shao Sword sect. As a result, they would have to spend another 2 to 3 years to repair the damage. At this moment, Xianxia suddenly spoke. I heard that Chu Luiyue helped save many people in the Mystic Forest. Not only our Dragon Teeth Mountain disciples, but the other sects also more or less received her help, right? As he spoke, he looked at Xuanhuan and deliberately asked. Xuanhuan, it seems that your precious son was also saved by them? Xuanhuan immediately retorted. Impossible. There's no such thing at all. Xianxia was shocked as he looked at the people beside him. Oh, I wonder if anyone here has heard of this matter? The entire hall fell into an eerie silence. Everyone had different expressions. Xuanhuan sneered. I know that Chu Luiyue has some capabilities, but with her abilities, it's probably difficult for her to even protect herself, let alone help others. And she even helped so much? Xianxia, what you're saying is too outrageous. After a moment, someone suddenly spoke. Dragon Teeth Mountain Master is right. Our sect's disciples were indeed saved by Chu Luiyue and the others. Xuanhuan immediately looked over with a frown and realized that the person speaking was the Palace Master of Holy Flame Palace. He sneered and was about to mock him when someone spoke again. Our Heavenly Secrets Residence's disciples did mention this when they returned. Xuanhuan's expression froze. It was fine if Xianxia said that alone, but everyone actually admitted it one after another? The other sects were all silent, obviously not intending to refute. This made the patriarchs of the various aristocratic families sitting across from him shocked. As they didn't participate in this matter much, they didn't know much. Previously, they only thought that there were heavy casualties in Dahuang Swamp and didn't expect there to be such a thing inside. Xianxia touched his chin and broke the silence. Xuanhuan, it seems like your precious son didn't tell you on purpose? Then he probably didn't say that Yang Qin in your sect chose to self-destruct because she was found to be problematic, right? I heard that she almost harmed many people back then. Xuanhuan suddenly looked up with a shocked expression. He really didn't know. After Song Qingyin and the two disciples returned, he rushed over to take a look at them immediately. The two seriously injured disciples were quickly sent for treatment. Song Qingyin didn't say much and only said that he was very tired, so he went to rest. Song Huan's heart ached and only cared about being thankful that his son was still alive. How could he care about anything else? He quickly reacted and said sternly, "Dragon Teeth Mountain Lord, you can't spout nonsense." Right at this time, a voice suddenly sounded from outside the hall. What he said previously was indeed true. Everyone looked back and saw that it was Jiang Yuqing. No one reported it and they didn't know how long he had been listening outside. Jiang Yuqing walked into the hall and everyone kept quiet. Song Huan became nervous. Jiang Yuqing was present and had a special identity. If he said that, he hurriedly restrained his expression. After Qingyin came back he was in low spirits, so I let him rest. I didn't know much about it. Jiang Yuqing shook his head lightly. Actually, he didn't take this to heart at all. His attention was mostly on Yuqi Song. Before he came, he happened to see Yuqi Song enter first and then heard Song Huan's provocation. Thus, he decided to listen outside for a while. What made him feel strange was that Yuqi Song seemed to know that Chu Luiyue and the rest hadn't returned yet, but he didn't seem to be very sad. It was fine for Chang Wanzhou and the rest. Yuqi Song might know that they were just looking for someone in the mystic forest. But Chu Luiyue, she was dead. Yuqi Song shouldn't have such a reaction. Prince Consort. This anxious shout attracted everyone's attention. Everyone looked up in unison. They saw a figure quickly walking over from outside the hall. Jiang Yuqing frowned. It was Chani. Why didn't xuanhuan come? He walked over, but before he could say anything he heard Chani say, "Prince Consort, the third princess has something on at the last minute. Please go to Huayang Hall first. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 778. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was shocked. Everyone present had been gathered by xuanhuan. Now that everyone was here, she didn't come. Instead, she wanted to call Jiang Yuqing over. What was going on? Something came up at the last minute? What could it be for her to abandon everyone here and invite Jiang Yuqing alone? Even if he was the prince consort and had an extraordinary status, this didn't seem appropriate, right? Everyone present was an important figure in the Tianling dynasty. Everyone looked at each other. Their expressions weren't very good. Jiang Yuqing was also very surprised. He frowned inwardly. No matter how impudent xuanhuan was, she wouldn't dare to act recklessly at this time. None of the people here could be easily offended. Even His Majesty had to be polite to these people, let alone third Princess xuanhuan. If she hadn't gone crazy, then something important had really happened. He glanced at Chani and found that although Chani had her eyes lowered, her face was very tense. There was some anxiety in her eyes. His heart sank and he turned to look at everyone. "Please wait for a moment. We'll be back soon." Although everyone was dissatisfied, they wouldn't show it on their faces. They all told him to go quickly. Jiang Yuqing knew that he had offended them this time. However, the situation was urgent and there was nothing he could do. He turned and walked in the direction of Huayang Palace. Chani quickly followed. After the two of them left, the palace fell silent again. No one said anything, but they were more or less dissatisfied. xuanhuan hadn't officially ascended the throne yet, but she was already so bold. She made so many people wait for her. When the time was up, she still didn't appear. Instead, she called Jiang Yuqing away, leaving everyone here. Before this, whether it was His Majesty or the princess, they had never done such an inappropriate thing. The people from the aristocratic families were fine, but the people from the sects were especially unhappy. Their families had suffered heavy losses in the Dahuang swamp trip. They wanted to ask xuanhuan for an explanation. Who would have thought that she wouldn't even show her face now? A cold and solemn atmosphere spread in the palace. Jiang Yuqing and Chani traveled quickly. When they arrived at Huayang Palace, they discovered that the palace was already heavily guarded. He felt more and more uneasy as he walked toward the main hall. When she reached the door, Chani stopped. "Prince Consort, the third princess said that only you can enter." Jiang Yuqing nodded, a little upset. He pushed the door open and walked in. The moment he entered, Chani closed the door behind him. Jiang Yuqing's expression turned serious. What exactly happened that made Huayang Palace so vigilant? What? He called out, but no one answered. He looked around but didn't see xuanhuan. Instead, he saw a broken box of cream beside the bronze mirror. He paused for a moment before continuing to walk inside. If it wasn't here, then it should be in the hot spring inside. Just as he walked to the door, he was hesitating whether to go in and look for her when he heard a painful groan coming from inside. It was weak and oppressive, and it also carried a trace of deep fear. It was xuanhuan. Jiang Yuqing didn't stay any longer as he directly pushed the door open and walked in. The moment he walked in, a hot and humid steam surged toward him. This was a gigantic hot spring. Smoke surrounded it and he couldn't see anyone clearly. However, Jiang Yuqing had been here before, so he knew where it was. Amidst the blurry steam, he could vaguely see a figure beside the hot spring. What's wrong? He walked toward that person. But the moment he got close, he smelled a strong bloody smell. More importantly, there was a hint of rotting smell in this bloody stench. Jiang Yuqing couldn't be more familiar with this smell. Isn't this the strange smell in the mystic forest? This smell was nauseating. Jiang Yuqing suppressed his disgust and walked forward. Xuanhuan was wearing 2 layers of unlined clothing as she lay at the edge of the hot spring. Her hands were tightly clawing the ground. Hearing Jiang Yuqing's voice, she moved with much difficulty and spoke. Yuqing? Her voice was hoarse and her breathing was weak. Jiang Yuqing went forward and carefully held her shoulders. Why are you lying here? Everyone is waiting for you. His voice stopped abruptly. This was because there was actually a pool of blood in the hot spring nearby. Wretch. Xuanhuan's body trembled and she vomited blood again. But this wasn't what shocked Jiang Yuqing the most. He swept his gaze across and shockingly discovered that Xuanhuan's exposed arm had actually become much thinner. I just didn't see her for half a day, but her arm has actually become so skinny. There's clearly a problem. He was very shocked and was about to ask when he saw a faint dark green light flowing under her skin. It was very strange. That light? Isn't that light exactly the same as the one I saw in the mystic forest? What's going on with your body? Asked Jiang Yuqing anxiously. It's no wonder Xuanhuan hurriedly called me over. This kind of situation was really too strange. Xuanhuan grabbed his hand and started crying in despair. I don't know either. At first she just wanted to wash up, but not long later she realized that something was wrong with her body. That dark green light was flowing all over her body, and her body started to become thinner at a visible speed. It was as if her muscles, bones, and flesh were all being swallowed by this thing. Xuanhuan had never seen such a situation before, and she was scared to death at that time. Seeing that things were going out of control, she could only get Qianyi to call Jiang Yuqing over. Yuqing, you have to save me. You must save me. Xuanhuan hugged his arm and cried in pain and panic as she begged non-stop. Jiang Yuqing's pupils constricted. The current Xuanhuan's appearance was completely ruined, and her body was also very skinny. He felt very uncomfortable hugging her, and she looked neither human nor ghost. If it weren't for his strong mental fortitude, he really couldn't help but fling her away. The spot where Xuanhuan hugged him tightly seemed to have lice, and it was very itchy and uncomfortable. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath in before asking, Did you make use of that mother tree in the mystic forest? Mystic forest. It was silent in the dark space. Chu Liyue's force surrounded him, and he was clearly stronger than before. After digesting the swallowing force again, Chu Liyue slowly opened his eyes. His gaze became even brighter and brighter, and his body became much lighter. His entire body seemed to be filled with abundant energy. Taizu couldn't help but praise him. Luyu, hang in there for a while longer, and you should be able to successfully break through to peak stage 5. Chu Liyue smiled brightly, then looked opposite him and squinted his eyes. A dark green light appeared out of nowhere and surged toward the Tian baby. Chu Liyue teased him. Where did you get such modeled energy from? You want this too? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning in to this Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.